It's Monday, it's the start of a brand new week, and we're here for you to start it off on the right note. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you for joining me right here on the AM show. Now, coming up shortly, we're going to be having the news, and right after that, the news review will be joined by Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Abrahima. He is our guest. But from there, we get into our big stories, and the first one on our radar, we are going to be talking health. The Ghana Health Service received a notification of 2 confirmed Lassa fever cases from the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research on the 24th of February this year. Both cases were recorded outside, or inside Accra. And the first case was a 40-year-old trader who was unwell for a period of about 2 weeks and finally died at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Then, the second case. He is a contact of the fatal case and is currently on admission, but is very stable. So far, contacts have been identified and are being followed up on. Now, we're going to be discussing this morning how to stem the tide locally of this scourge, Lassa fever. Dr. Fred Adomako-Boateng is Bono East Director of Health. We also have joining the conversation other medical experts who will be helping us dilate on this matter. But also on the show, we're speaking to the National Union of Ghana Students, which is asking the Student Loan Trust Fund to, as a matter of urgency, release funds to applicants for the current academic year. Now, the NUC's president, Dennis Labi, is our guest. He'll be joining us on the latest as far as that is concerned. But how can we ignore everything going on around us, specifically in Nigeria? We'll be telling you about the Nigerian elections as Nigeria decides, as we call it. Counting is underway pending the declaration of the winner of the presidential elections. There's been a lot of stuff to talk about, basically. Ballot box snatching, burning of items here and there, people getting slashed. And of course, the Labour Party's candidate, Peter, will be coming out to say, you know what? These elections are fraught with problems. But how are things panning out? We'll be giving you the scoop on that. After that, we'll tell you how plastic waste is destroying our water bodies. That's the focus of our latest Hotline documentary produced by Richard Kwejo Nyako. Today being a Monday, we'll also give you our drive safe tip for this week. Look forward to that. And later we offer you the opportunity, as always, to share your thoughts with us because the show is all about you. Send us a message in the course of our live stream with the hashtag AM show, and at the tail end, give us a call. On that note, let's settle for the news up next. Thank you for staying. Let's settle for the news now. And in our first story, former President John Mahama is asking religious leaders to speak truth to power. He says the situation where some churches become selective in their criticism of government is unacceptable. Addressing the induction ceremony of the new General Superintendent of the Assemblies of God Church, Ghana, the former president said the church had to be bold and direct government when things are not going right.
The church does not exist only to pray for leaders. It exists also to provide suggestions and guidance to leaders. Because after all, the church does not hang in the sky. The church exists in society. And whatever happens in society affects the church. Today, with the economic crisis that we are in, it affects our congregation all across the country. And so it's necessary for the church to continue speaking out anytime it thinks that things are not going properly. And that's why I want to congratulate the Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Church Council for the recent letter that they addressed to government, giving some suggestions about what government should do in the midst of this crisis. And I expect that this should be done no matter which government is in office. There are many times when men of God and moral society who should speak up become quiet when one government is in and then become very loud when another government is in. We must not shout "Jansa for we're here" in one government and then go quiet in another one. I know that some churches have convention centers and places like that, beautiful places like that. And I note the church of my former chairman, the Pentecost Church, have a very beautiful convention center outside Kaswa there somewhere. But I spoke with Reverend Wengham and we conspired, and I'm telling Elder Ofosuampofo to tell Reverend Nyamiche that our centenary village is going to be bigger and more beautiful than your convention center. And may it not suffer the fate of some national cathedrals that I know. We shall build this one, and I'll be one of the chief fundraisers.
Now, the chairman of the Governing Council of the Simon Diedong Dombo University of Business and Integrated Development Studies, Kweku Yamwa-Paintel, is worried about the number of uncompleted projects at the university. He wants government to give the university its fair share of development to address the infrastructural deficit. Mr. Paintel made the appeal at the first graduation of the SDD UBITS in Wa, from where JoyNews' Rafiq Salam reports.
The Simon Diedong Dombo University of Business and Integrated Development Studies, SDD UBITS, formerly the Wa campus of the University for Development Studies, UDS, became autonomous in 2019 following the enactment of the University Bill and approved by Parliament of Ghana. The aim of SDD UBITS, among others, is to provide higher education, disseminate knowledge related to development in business and development studies, undertake research, and foster relationship with organizations and persons outside the university. The graduation held for 1,176 students who have pursued various courses in the weekend Masters in Business Administration and regular diploma programs is therefore the first by the university since its attained autonomous status. Thousands of graduates, upon completion of their courses at the various universities in the country, join the unemployment wagon and look up to government for employment. Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, in a speech read on his behalf by Deputy Minister of Education, Gifted Chum Ampafo, however, urged graduates to be different.
You should not go out there and sit down and fold your arms with the excuse that there are no jobs, because the jobs are with you. You have the privilege, first ever graduates, to have the skills and the development of all that we expect. And with the kind of lectures you have here, I expect much more from you. Create job opportunities with the knowledge and skills you acquired, and employ people to close the employment gaps in the country.
He said, government since 2017 has been working to create a needed peaceful and stable environment for businesses to grow. Hence, government commitment and investment in technical and vocational education.
We've also equipped a number of technical institutions, the TVET institutions, to ensure that if these investors need engineers and technicians, they will have those who are globally competitive. It is not only the TVET institutions that we have refurbished, retooled, facelifted. Likewise, the technical universities, the 10 technical universities, we've also done a lot by equipping them.
For the umpteenth time, the issue of infrastructure deficit at SDD UBITS was repeated in both the speech of the Vice Chancellor and the Chairman of the Governing Council. Behind me is this huge structure and other structures at the university of whose work is moving at a snail's pace.
It is interesting to know that the university from its inception in 2019 is yet, I repeat, is yet to benefit from any of the developed projects from the government. And it's our firm conviction that government will remember to give us a fair share of the national cake to help address the infrastructural deficit. GET fund projects, which have also been stalled over the period, should be completed to ease the pressure being mounted on the mega facility of the university.
But we are also hoping that government will rise up to the occasion provide the fundamentals, including the completion of our library complex and the lecture halls that we so need for the expansion of the university.
Apawas Regional Minister Dr. Hafiz bin Sali, however, has some assurance for the university.
All the issues that have been enumerated here are well known to me, and the council chairman as well as the VC know that these are things that have been pursuing to ensure that government places priority attention on these issues. So I want to assure you that we will do whatever we can.
In our next story, non-governmental organization World Vision Ghana says government's decision to revert to the use of the English language as the medium of instruction at the early grades will defeat its investments in the educational sector over the past years. According to the NGO, government must hold broader stakeholders' engagement before it rolls out the new policy. Project Officer, Education and Life Skills Kennedy Amponsah spoke during this year's celebration of International Mother Language Day at Kejebi in the OT region.
For us in World Vision, we believe that the mother language is the first language the children or any child is exposed to right from birth. And so if they are taught in such a language, that is what they know. It helps them to understand and appreciate what teachers are teaching. And they are able to ride on that to learn another language. And so our project has been championing the use of mother language when you look at learning route and unlock literacy. But as we speak, government policy is encouraging the use of English at the expense of the mother language. And we think, and research has also proven, that is not very helpful, because then the children are learning from the unknown to the known instead of learning from the known to the unknown. The celebration of this Mother Language Day has been an advocacy tool. There has been a lot of activities. There's been discussions at the national level, and at the area program level, we are also doing this. So today's program is to also create awareness and advocate for the use of mother language in schools, especially the lower primary levels. We want to suggest that government does a broader consultation on this very important decision, and it is our hope that in future, if not immediately, we will revert to the use of the mother language in our schools.
Now, moving on from there, some aggrieved farmers in Ashiem, a suburb of Nkoranza in the Bono East region, are appealing to government to help reclaim their farmlands after some members of the Nkoranza traditional area allegedly sold their land to foreign investors. The farmers say their produce is being destroyed by these developers, a situation they say would compound their economic woes if not addressed. Anas Sabit was in that community and came through with this report.
They destroyed all our farm produce. What do we do now together with our children and the next generation? All we are saying is that they should sell the entire community to the developers because we are tired now. These aggrieved residents of Ashayim, clad in red and black, are up in arms with the Nkoranza Traditional Council for allegedly selling their farmlands to unknown investors, thereby putting them out of business. The affected group, who are mainly farmers, say their crops are currently being destroyed by these developers without prior notice and compensation. Nana J. Poku is the Dikru of the community. We visited the Nkoranza Traditional Council after we were told about the sales of the lands, and we were driven away. At least between 200 and 300 farmers have been affected and opposed these sales because we can't leave this community. And that is why we are calling on you to come to our aid. These farmers whose lives, including supporting their children's education, solely depend on what they earn from their farms, say the situation, if not addressed, would mean they will have to stay unemployed, a situation that would compound to their economic hardships.
We are pleading the chiefs and government, including MPs and MCE, that they should help us. Women and children in Atashem here, we are suffering from that matter because it's farming that we are doing to take care of our children. But if they collect the land, where will we go? All the land surrounding us, they have collected it. So we are pleading. They should collect the land for us so that we also take care of our children.
We took the pain to visit some of the affected farms and we met these excavators clearing the lands as narrated by these aggrieved farmers. I came to meet the excavator destroying my farm and some of the workers taking advantage to take my yams and cassava. I have 5 children now. What are we going to feed on from now onwards? So we are appealing to government to intervene before we die of hunger.
President Obia omufo mumwa no mmabuan na saa ni ma no esun de re entimi ntwa na nya saa de a enu we nwa hwe yi a ewudieri ne ma ense fata ebetuma si kuru nu ayaya ni bri sempa ene gina aye kasa no.
This aggrieved group have a common plea. They call on regional authorities and government to intervene in order to save the situation. Bismarck Ajipoko is the chairman of the group.
Ashenko yase ye de ha na yete adwuma ye ya na ekwadwuma ti sesa na tede a yeso ya mpene afiyemfe nu ntona na bia so ana yemfe nu kwato obia so because ehun say obia ka.
This has been our only source of livelihood and so we won't allow anyone to claim these lands.
So munnim na sa mu de gadabele si asase no so biem
omuduama and so we are calling on the gods for land to deal with anyone who lawfully destroy our farm produce. Reporting for Joy News, Anas Sabit, Ashayim.
Now, the Ghanaian Society of Cardiology wants government to efficiently manage rural-urban migration to ensure a healthy population. President Dr. Alfred Doku observes a lack of recreational centers has hindered the practice of healthy lifestyles. He was speaking at the 5th Annual General and Scientific Meeting in Kumasi.
Over 90 million people die annually from cardiovascular diseases globally. Strokes and heart diseases are the leading causes of death in Ghana. Dr. Alfred Doku thinks a development plan that incorporates establishment of recreational centers is key to ensuring a healthy lifestyle.
We need to manage this urbanization properly. Okay, rural-urban migration should be managed by government properly. Government should enact policies that will make sure that yes, you don't build dedicated areas for pavement for walking, or parks for walking, all these in designated areas. Most time people build on those places, and then the whole community doesn't have a social center, doesn't have a walking lane or things like bicycle lane. We don't have this in the society. So I think government needs to take both steps, making sure that yes, before you're giving a permit, you're not building, there are necessary structures in place to make sure that these things are available for people to enjoy and to live a healthy lifestyle.
The annual meeting is under the theme Gender and Cardiovascular Health. Recent findings have established men are 50% likely to die from heart diseases as compared to women. Dr. Doku entreated men to be mindful of their health.
Okay, when it comes to cardiovascular disease, affects both men and women. Men tend to die more from cardiovascular disease, especially in Africa, because the health-seeking behavior of men is really low. If you go to a typical hospital, 70% of those who are accessing health in our hospital are women or children. The rest, only 20 to 30% are men. Okay? So men are likely to detect, the cardiovascular disease quite late. One, they are not diagnosed with hypertension early, and they tend to have this stroke and heart diseases, which usually in advanced stage. Women, even when it comes to the management, women are more compliant, with management. So if you give medication to a woman, she's likely to take it. She's likely to monitor her blood pressure at home. She's likely to do a lot of healthy, lifestyle activities compared to men.
Reporter for JoyNews, Kwesi Deborah.
Our next story now, and traditional authorities at Ziavi in the whole municipality of the Volta region want government to speed up construction work on the Ziavi and Fuega roads. Paramount Chief Togbega Kweku Eyim IV underscored the economic significance of a better road network in the area. Fred Kwame reports.
The Abazonli Festival was instituted to commemorate the exodus of 7 communal groups from Nochie in Togo under the leadership of King Agokoli. The groups thereafter settled at present-day Ziavi, Etondome, Kpando Anyegbe, Kpeje Tojin, Botoku, Mepe, and Ando in Togo. Addressing the grand debate of the 11th edition of the Abazonli Festival, the Paramount Chief of Ziavi Traditional Area, Togbega Koku Ayim, called for unity among the 7 traditional areas. He, however, lamented the deplorable state of the road networks in his area and called for government's intervention. We are happy construction works have resumed on the Ziavi and Fueta road network. We are appealing to the government to ensure the contractor does not abandon the project, but should continue and complete it. The access road from Ho to Ziavi Jogbe is in a bad state. We want it reconstructed to join the Amfueta road. This would make traveling from Ho to Amfueta comfortable. The Chief of Staff, Madame Frema Osei Opari, promised to ensure the timely completion of the projects.
Upon successful completion of Agenda 111 projects, all districts in Ghana will be in a position to boast of the provision of a healthcare infrastructure in line with government's commitment of ensuring universal health care to all citizens in the attainment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 3. I would like to assure you of my sincerest commitment towards the successful completion of whatever we have started together in Ziavi. In doing so, I take careful note of the request tabled by the Paramount Chief, including the plan to construct a residential accommodation for healthcare staff. The idea to construct a facility such as this to serve Ziavi and its environs is commendable and complements government efforts towards ensuring equitable access to healthcare.
There was a shared display of culture and tradition at the Deba, which was attended by all 7 traditional areas belonging to the Abazonli Union. Fred Kwame Asari, JoyNews, Ziavi.
And from Ziavi and Fueta, that's how we cap off the news this morning. But stay with us in the next few minutes. We'll be joined by Sulemana Braima as we get into the latest news items from the papers. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying. Time now for us to get into the papers, and we're joined by Sulemana Braima, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. He'll be with us shortly. But I have this morning the Daily Graphic, the Ghanaian Times newspaper, Daily Guide, the Finder, Economy Times, among a host of other newspapers that we're going to be taking a look at. Let me just try to see whether we have Suleiman Abraima on board. And mind you, the news review is brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. I'll be telling you a bit more about them as the news review goes on. Mr. Abraima, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Ben. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. How are you doing this week as we start another one? It's a Monday.
Well, it's been quite some 2 days of rest, and so I look forward to a positive week, even though the situation sometimes makes it difficult to envisage a positive situation. But I think all in all, we just have to have hope and keep going.
Have hope and keep going. There's a whole lot to talk about, but I'd like to start off on the international front because, like we know, Nigeria is Africa's biggest democracy in terms of population. And whatever happens there has to be of interest to us, especially as we're close neighbors. And we have very good ties all the way from the 1960s, even before that. But especially after our independence, a few years later, they're gaining independence as well. What do you make of their electoral process so far since Saturday? The elections started. In some areas, there were delays by about 3+ hours as WTO boss Dr. Ngozi made mention of when she went to vote. People were in the queue. There was a large voter turnout among the youth. There was talk that if that happened, likely Peter Obi, who has been known to be anti-graft, very strict, very firm, could win. But that representative of the Labour Party has come out to say things are not going well. The burning of ballot boxes, intimidation. I saw a video of this woman who had been slashed across the face, who still insisted on voting. It's been said that the process has been fraught with so many problems, but the INEC says it has it all together. Your quick reflection on what's going on in Nigeria.
Well, elections in Nigeria, as you said, is really a critical one, not just for that country, but also for Africa. It is the biggest democracy, 94 million registered voters, with about 87 million people having obtained their voter cards that enables them to vote. And remember, that's about 3 times the total population of Ghana, not the total registered population, but the total population. If you're looking at the total registered population in Ghana for voting purposes, then you are talking about 6 times the number on Ghana's electoral roll. So that's really a massive one. Over the years, efforts have been made in Nigeria to sort of improve the conditions from one election to the other. But it appears that the problems persist. And for me, it is not surprising because even before elections, we all keep reading and hearing about developments in the northeastern part of Nigeria, in certain northern states with Boko Haram and the frequent attacks and all of that. And therefore, you would expect that a situation or a process like this that involves people coming out in numbers and in droves would certainly present an opportunity for those who are already looking for, minor opportunities to cause mayhem and violence. And so what is happening in some parts of Nigeria, very, very unfortunate, but I would say not too surprising, even though steps could have been taken to prevent such a situation. My expectation would have been that for a country like this, yes, you don't want to have any sort of interference, any sort of foreign involvement and all of that. But given the size and the issues of Nigeria, it would have been ideal if ECOWAS, for example, had mobilized to say, look, for this kind of elections, we need not just observers, civilian observers, but we need to beef up security. And therefore, we are mobilizing maybe additional troops, whether it's police and the military from other countries to come in and help so that we can have an incident-free election. And of course, maybe that was prevented or avoided because of the whole thing about foreign involvement and interference and all of that. So be it as it may, we're just hoping that things will go on smoothly because it is early days yet. The results are yet to be declared, and whether people accept or not accept is another matter. But we just all hope and pray that things will go well. At the end of the day, a new president would have been elected, and Nigeria will stay safe and united so that we keep going. Because when Nigeria coughs, when Nigeria sneezes, we all cough because of its sheer size, the relationship with other countries, and particularly here in West Africa. Peter Obi, whether he wins or not, has brought a very, very important dynamics to elections in Nigeria. And the other day I was saying that I hope that 2024 Ghana would also have its own Peter Obi, so that it wouldn't be the usual thing of taking things for granted, NPP, NDC, or in Nigeria, APC, PDP. Even if he doesn't win these elections, I think that he stands a chance of becoming president in the near future in Nigeria. So good wishes to our people in Nigeria, and I hope that in the few days ahead, election results would have been declared and we'll have a president to keep on going.
Well, we do pray for that, and we'll see how things go from there. Let's come back to Ghana. And indeed, that point you make about the stranglehold of the NDC and the MPP, just as we have in Nigeria, the PDP and the APC. We're hoping that some third force would be brought to bear in there. And who knows, it could happen in Ghana as well. Nigeria setting the pace as far as that is concerned. The Daily Graphic this morning, President Akufo-Addo with Naba Azoka II, overlord of the Kusang traditional area, the Jubilee House. What did that have to do with President Akufo-Addo? Boku Naba renewed commitment to lasting peace in Boku. Just last week, Friday, on my blunt thoughts, I was making that call that more had to be done. Mr. President had to be more visible. So this is good news for me. I'll be getting into details of that story. Cocoa industry under threat. Illegal miners destroy rehabilitated farms. And this morning we're talking about farms, cassava farms and others in the Bono East region being lost. There's also Nigeria elections will be credible, INEC boss insists. Reverend Wengam takes over as 7th Assemblies of God General Superintendent. And then mining firms should undertake legacy projects, NAELP coordinator. Let's get into the stories. The country's cocoa industry is facing one of its biggest threats ever as illegal gold miners continue a major onslaught on cocoa farms, including those recently rehabilitated under a national program. The Ghana Cocoa Board had warned that the industry could head for a disaster if the illegal activities were not checked. Raising the alarm, the executive director of the Cocoa Health and Extension Services, Reverend Edwin Afari, said the National Cocoa Rehabilitation Program being undertaken by Cocoa Board at a cost of about 4.8 billion Ghana cedis was under severe threat from illegal mining, that is, galamsey activities. Recently, quoting him, he says, I was around the Boinso area in the Awin municipality of the Western region, and for about 36.5 hectares that we did, they had cut down all of them for galamsey. He told journalists in Cape Coast last Friday on the margins of a ceremony to award 15 visually impaired cocoa farmers from the Central, Western, and Brong Ahafo. I don't know why they're still using Brong Ahafo, because now we have Bono East, Bono and Ahafo regions for their immense contributions to cocoa production. Just to give a bit of a breakdown, on September 24, 2020, President Akufo-Addo launched the National Cocoa Rehabilitation Program at Seshiriose in the Western North region with the objective of rehabilitating farms affected by the cocoa swollen shoot virus disease, which had become unproductive. Again, under the program, Cocoa Board bears the full cost of the 2-year-long rehabilitation process. In addition, Cocoa Board gives 1,000 Ghana cedis per hectare to each farmer whose farm is affected by the disease, while in the case of tenancy, both the affected tenant farmers and their landowners are compensated. You're very passionate, I know, about matters to do with especially farming, especially cocoa farming. What's your take on this latest trend?
Well, the threat is real. I don't even know whether it is a threat at this stage. I think that
it's a full-blown attack.
Exactly. And again, for me, I am not surprised because the approach that was used was certainly not going to work. Very limited farmer education. And remember that if a hectare of cocoa farm is being cut and you say you give 1,000 cedis to the farmer, is it to the caretaker or to the landowner? Remember, when you go to many of these places, the actual owner of the cocoa farm is not the person who is in the village where the farm is. It's either the person is in a neighboring town or a neighboring city, and the caretaker survives on the farm, whether it is the plantain that is in the farm or the cassava that is in the farm or whatever it is. So if you are giving 1,000 to the farmer, is it to the caretaker or to the landlord? That's number one. Number two is that we've gotten ourselves into a situation as a country where everyone is looking for quick money, whether it is the politician who is well paid or the civil servant who is well paid. Everyone is looking for money. And evidence of that is how we abused COVID money, for example. So if you go and you say you are rehabilitating these 4 acres of this cocoa farm and you are providing 4,000 cedis, just 4,000 cedis to the landlord or the caretaker, and then the person realizes that, oh, my land is actually endowed with gold. And even on 1 hectare alone, even if I were to give it out, I could make 200,000 cedis versus the 1,000 cedis that the government is providing. And remember, the cocoa that is being planted will take me the next 3, 4, 5 years before I start harvesting. And even that, it will be gradual. Every year, I will make like maybe 3,000 or 4,000. And here's the case. Within a matter of 6 months, I can make 200,000. The politician would do it. So why would you expect that the farmer would not do it? The politician who is supposed to provide leadership and provide inspiration, guidance, live that moral, upright life in terms of, look, let's preserve our environment for the future, wouldn't do that, wants everything today. And so if the farmers are doing it, for me, it is not surprising. So for me, right from the word go, it was not going to be sustainable. I have family members, I have friends who are still in cocoa farms, and they would say, look, this thing the government is doing is a joke. It is not going to work. It is certainly not going to work. Even if the land is not endowed with gold, it is not going to work because there's no sensitization, no public education. They've been living in cocoa farms for the last, 50, 60 years, nothing. A young man comes to do galamsey over some 6 months or less period. The person is building in Kumasi or building in Accra. And you want them to still stay there in the cocoa farm and say, oh, we want to support Ghana. When the money that is coming from cocoa is being abused and looted by the authorities at the helm, and they would continue to stay poor. I think that is the challenge, and we need to accept it. Otherwise, we will not go anywhere as a country.
Let's go to page 16 now, move away from cocoa farming and galamsey, and there is a threat there, an existential threat, which also borders on terrorism. But tied to that, we have another story as well that has got all of us with our hearts in our mouths. It has to do with the Boku development. Recently, there was a Treponi issue as well, where 5 people, were affected, a soldier, 4 others, and about 4 people killed. But what are the details here? The president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and the overlord of the Kusaug traditional area, Naba Abugrago Azoka II, have renewed their commitment to amicably resolve the security situation in Boku. Now, at a meeting at the Jubilee House last Friday, President Akufo-Addo said ensuring peace in Boku remained a priority of the government. Hence, the relevant authorities would continue to work closely with the Kusaug Traditional Authority towards achieving that objective, he reiterated. Now, the president further reiterated assurances that any development likely to undermine the peace and security of the area would be swiftly dealt with in accordance with the laws of the state. He expressed appreciation to the Boku Naba for the leadership shown in the prevailing impasse and assured him of the government's unwavering commitment to ensuring lasting peace to the Boku enclave. Your take, like I was sharing with you, I was calling on Mr. President just last Friday saying that a lot more had to be done because if this gets out of hand, we'll all suffer. We don't want to feed into the terrorist threat and all of that. Today, we hear that some action has been taken, some interactions have been had with the overlord, and there is some sort of path. But has enough been done still? And what more do you see should be done? Now, I do accept, let me issue this disclaimer for you, that you are from that area and you know the history of the place. The last time we had an interaction, some people felt that maybe you were leading in one direction, a discussion we had. So Putting it into context, what do you think should be the way forward?
Well, thank you, Ben. And I really admire the way you are able to pronounce Kusag. You know, I've listened to a lot of presenters and they butcher the name. And Kusag is what represents the entirety of the area occupied by the Kusasis in the Upper East region. So the 6 political districts of Zebila, Binduri, Boku Central, Boku Municipal, Garu, Timpani, and which other one? I think is that's it. The 6 areas: Garu, Timpani, Pusiga, Boku Central, Binduri, and Zebila. And I think that yes, I'm a Kusasi. I'm from the area. And what we all yearning for is peace. I think what is happening is really needless. So far, a lot of people have died. Young people left their families, wives and children. And it is absolutely needless. I really don't know why people would let us get ourselves into this kind of protracted situation, which is not just affecting lives, but affecting property, affecting development in the area. And people are suffering and still are adamant to adopt peace processes. I think that the government of the day could have done certain things quite swiftly to prevent the conflict from getting to where it has gotten to in terms of duration and in terms of the casualties and in terms of the impact and also in terms of the level of resources that the state has had to spend in maintaining peace in the area. But I must say that over the period, President Akufo-Addo himself has really demonstrated what has to be done in terms of being fair on the side of truth, on the side of justice, and on the side of fairness. And I'm not surprised that the president once again invited the overlord of the area to come for dialogue. And you and I, the president certainly knows a lot more when it comes to security and all of that than you and I.
Right.
And because he gets daily briefings.
Exactly. He's supposed to get a daily briefing if that happens, that we are not privy to.
Exactly. So the other day I made the point that, look, the overlord of the area, Naba Asigri Abugurago Azoka II, I know him, and this is somebody who really, by his nature, by his demeanor, by his pronouncement, by his conduct, is a peaceful person. And in fact, it got to a point where the youth, the Kusasi youth, started even agitating that, look, every day he is talking about peace, 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 and they cannot sit down and be killed, they cannot sit down and be... And he continuously says, look, the development of the area cannot be fostered if we are in this kind of situation. Let us allow peace to prevail. And I made the point that, look, but for his insistence, you would have seen the conflict escalate to the other districts because all those places are Kusasi areas. And we would have had a situation where people would say, look, given this, what is happening in Boku, if you are this tribe or that ethnic group in our area, we want you out and so on. But consistently, he's maintained that, look, this conflict is within the municipality, within the capital of the Kusag area. Please don't allow it to escalate, and let's do everything possible to bring peace to the area. And I think that the government is really doing quite a good job at this stage by enforcing the law. I have always said what will bring the situation under control is law enforcement. Make sure that the country's laws are being enforced. Whether that would affect the Kusasis or that would affect the Mamprisis or whichever ethnic group, let the laws work. Once the law is working and there is rule of law, it doesn't matter. And like I said, I'm a Kusasi. If it is my people who are on the other side of the law, let the law deal with them. If it is the Mamprisis who are, on the other side of the law, let the law deal with them. And that is the only way we can bring peace to the area. But at the beginning, it was almost like, oh, let us do this. And it was because of politics. And that is why, for me, the NDC as a political party, I think their silence on this matter has been so loud. They are not in power, but we all know there are political dynamics to the issues in Boku. And you would have expected that.
So are you also feeding into that rhetoric that the Kusasis tend to opt for the NDC, the Mamprisis tend to opt for the MPP? I mean, people have debunked that. Others have said that is the reality. The likes of Colonel retired Festus Abwaje, have said that that is the reality. But some have also said it's not really the picture. Are you feeding into that as well?
Absolutely not. I think those who make that claim may not know the facts. Look, as we sit right now, the entire Upper East region has 15 parliamentary seats. The MPP won only 1 seat in the Upper East region. That seat came from the Kusasi area.
Right.
The person who won that seat, Honorable Abanga Abdullah, is 100% Kusasi. Mother, father is a Kusasi. Today, he is a deputy minister for Works and Housing. The deputy minister for Information is a Kusasi. The Upper East regional minister himself is a Kusasi. Are they saying that President Akufo-Addo appointed persons who are NDC people to his ministerial portfolios? That is absolutely not the case. You go to Nalerugu, which is the capital of the Mamprusis. The seat there was occupied by Haji Alima Mahama. Today, that seat is occupied by the NDC. Is it the case that if Mamprusis were MPP, why is it that in their traditional capital is the NDC that won the seat there? And how come, Akufo-Addo's appointees, majority of them are Kusasis? How come the only seat from Upper East is a Kusasi person? So I think people are still relating to history. At a time when maybe Rawlings came and, things had to be done properly, and so the Kusasis then ended up supporting the Rawlings regime. But things have changed since 1992, like I've given you. But for the Kusasi area, giving the MPP the single seat that they have from Upper East, MPP would not have had any seat from Upper East. Why would the regional minister for the entire region, made up of Bulses, Frafres, Kasines, Kusasis, Mosis, Houses, Bimobes, and Buzanges, how come the regional minister is a Kusasi? I don't think that is really the case. If you go to Ashanti region, you have people who vote MPP, those who vote NDC. People are still relating to history. Other than that, I don't see the reality in what they say. But I'm saying that, look, whether we like it or not, there is politics in the whole thing, where political parties would want to exploit the situation. And one would have expected the NDC, the leadership of the NDC, to at least say, look, we want peace in Boku, let peace prevail, the law must work, and so on and so forth. But so far, it's been silence. And I think people say the same thing about His Excellency the Vice President, who is a Mamprusi. And people would have been expecting him to say more, to be more visible in this matter. But people are not also seeing that from the Vice President. And some of us with open minds, we defend him. You go to places and they say, oh, the Vice President is behind it because it is his people. And I say, look, I know the Vice President, absolutely, this is not something that I believe he's happy about. But people say, then why is he quiet about the situation? So I think we need to hear more from the Vice President on this matter, because whether he likes it or not, he is from the area, he is a Mamprusi, and historically, his father has played a role in this conflict in terms of commissions, and he testifying and making certain statements. And so people expect to hear from the Vice President, people expect to hear from the NDC, and at the end of the day, as I said, it's basically the law that must work. As a country, we cannot be seen to be failing to enforce law in just a single district, and then say that when, it escalates to other districts, we will then be able to contain it. So kudos to the government, kudos to the president. I think the president has been firm and resilient in saying, I am a lawyer. I know the antecedents to this conflict.
Right.
I know the Supreme Court ruling, and I know the implications of it. And I must commend him at this stage and his government for ensuring that the laws are working. And that is the only way that we can bring peace to Boku. It is because of the government's action. That is why you haven't heard any explosions in Boku again.
Right.
Other than that, there was certainly going to be explosions once that person was purportedly ensconced in Nalerugu. And therefore, we need to commend the government and demand that more actions be taken. And I appeal to my people in Boku, whether Kusasis or Mamprusis, young people, look, we have long lives ahead of us. Let us focus on development rather than killing each other. Let us focus on, peace so that our territory can develop. It's a territory with a lot of commercial value. And why do we put it in this state? I think that let's dialogue. Let's put the guns aside. Let's dialogue. Think about progress. Think about development. That is what will help us, and not killing each other.
You can get, for those of you watching us, you can get more details on the Nigerian elections on page 20 of the Daily Graphic. Nigeria elections will be credible. INEC boss says so. And on the back page, unfortunately, Adriana Pip Kotoko, my own Kotoko, to advance out of the MTN FA Cup round of 16. And Faisal through to round of 8. That's how it went down. But let's quickly go through the rest of the papers. Yagbongra, man of peace, development-oriented president, eulogizes late paramount chief of Gonja traditional area. There's also first results expected from tight Nigeria election this week. Government committed to deepening decentralization in Ghana, that's according to Dan Boche, and admissions under computerized system increase SHS quota to 40%, that's according to Child Rights International, that's what they're advocating. And then ECG faces court action for felling trees as Chado residents fume at destruction of Green Ghana project. Let me bring you those stories very quickly, starting with page 3. And the East La Burma Valley Residents Association in Accra on Thursday gave the ECG 1-week ultimatum to replant the 50 trees it felled in the area without recourse to its environmental impact. According to the association, the decision to cut down the trees defeated the government's Green Ghana project and called on the ECG to take steps to restore those trees. I find it interesting because while government is greening, we don't know the numbers in terms of how many survive. But there is the attempt. The ECG, per the story, is not in compliance. I find it difficult to find out, to realize that a state institution, so to speak, would be diametrically opposed in terms of its work to a government's drive. But let me just add the second story so you reflect on them together. A child-centered organization, Child Rights International, is advocating an increase in the 30% quota system to 40% reserved for students of local communities in senior high school admissions under the new computerized system. That's the CSSPS. An increase to 40% quota, the organization said, would be beneficial and a bold step to fully scale up access to quality education to a majority of Ghanaian children of school age. However, the organization said if government, quote, aims to implement and have a comprehensive policy that would address the needs of rural children, then the quota system should be reviewed and, if possible, pegged at 40% to give more children the opportunity to have access to secondary school. Quick thoughts on these two?
Well, I think it's a good call. I'm not privy to the analysis of the free SHS placements and how students from certain communities are impacted. But of course, there are kids in particular areas who may not even prefer the school that is in their community. I mean, if as I did, I completed Kwadwo Betiako JHS or JSS at that time. I believe if there was a secondary school there, maybe that wouldn't have been my preference, even though I ended up also going to Tapa Secondary School, which was the nearest secondary school in the area. But of course, we've gotten to a point where if they are privy to the data and realizes that some people's aren't getting placed because they were not even placed in the schools within their localities, then of course that is a good call. But I think that that whole idea of having even 30% at this stage allocated to kids from localities where secondary schools are is a good move. And I don't know, like I said, because I'm not privy to the data, I don't know if that 30% is not really enough to serve the interest of persons from certain areas. Because as I said, somebody may finish school here, but the person wants to go to school in Cape Coast or in Takoradi or in Tamale. And so it is the data that will speak for it, and I believe that they are speaking on the basis of the data. On the ECG and the Green Ghana project issue, perhaps in my view, it is about initiatives that are done unplanned. So it's about we plant trees, and so just plant trees, just plant them anywhere. But of course, if it is gotten to a point where a certain tree is standing would not make electricity transmission possible, what do? Do we keep the tree and be in darkness? Or do we remove that tree, perhaps plant it at where it ought to be, and then get our electricity supply on? And I think that is it. I think it's a case of lack of planning in executing that initiative. Because yes, we all need the greens, we all need the trees everywhere.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you just can plant a tree anywhere. I think it must be something that is planned. And because of that lack of planning, that's why I'm sure this is happening.
Let's wrap with the next few stories. Lassa fever kills one. That's on page 6 of the Daily Guide newspaper. It actually has the story here. Let me just get to it. And the Ghana Health Service has confirmed an outbreak of Lassa fever in the country, recording 1 death. According to the GHS, it received notification of 2 confirmed Lassa fever cases from the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research on February 24, 2023. One of the cases was a 40-year-old trader who fell unwell for a period of about 2 weeks. And we know that the other person actually came into contact with this person. Lassa fever, very similar to Ebola in terms of its symptoms and effects, deadly. And we really have to curb that. IMF makes debt resolution case for Ghana. The story is on page 9. And I don't know whether you heard the German ambassador, going out and saying, Masa, very uncharacteristic of him. But look, you have all these ministers in there. Your country has more ministers than my country. Cut your coats according to your cloth and all of that. I found that interesting because usually they would stay away from this kind of rhetoric. You remember the former UK High Commissioner and comments that she made and the backlash from the IGP, among others. So I found that to be interesting. Then the Finder newspaper, free SHS, 91% of qualified students successfully placed. That's according to the Education Ministry. We saw the about 165,000, some of them thronging the Nat Hall. And then the Finder again, is Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to blame? That is the question there. After that, maybe I'll just take a look at some portion of the Publisher newspaper, the Ghanaian Publisher, to wrap. But your quick reflections on this. That's how we'll wrap the news review.
Yeah, I've been following the comments by the German ambassador. Of course, we know that diplomats sometimes would hedge on certain matters. But of course, at this stage, we are talking about a situation that also impacts his country. Because the government, our government has appealed to Germany to speak to China on debt forgiveness. We are appealing to the wealthy nations to either cancel some of the debts or amend the conditions of our debt in terms of when we can pay them. Indeed, what is happening is that this government is piling a lot of problems for future generations. I think all they care about is how do we solve our problems today? Whatever the problems of the future generations would be, we don't really care about it. And that's really unfortunate because all that is happening, defer the debt payment. For who to come and pay? If it is in the next 20 years, is it still President Akufo-Addo and Ofori-Atta and the others who are going to pay this? They are basically saying that, look, you push the burden to the future generations of this country. Meanwhile, not much is being done to cushion the future burden of the young generations, our children, and maybe even if not us, our children. So that for me is really unfortunate. And I can understand why the German ambassador will come out this way, because you are asking them to do something. And he says, look, your ministers, Ghana's ministers, is more than my country's ministers. So it means that you have the money. Look, we have been asking you to deal with, reducing the expenditure, reducing the cost of running government, and you are adamant. And then you are saying, give me money. How do I get convinced to do that? So I can understand the ambassador. And it is not just him. I think that the diplomatic community in Ghana, that is a collective position. Yes, they cannot come out to say it perhaps the way the German ambassador has been speaking of late, but that is the collective position. They all know how things are being mismanaged. And the earlier the government amends its ways, the better for our country, the better for our relations with these diplomatic, the foreign entities that are here, and the better for future generations. I think that is what I would say.
Thank you, Suleimana, for always doing us the honors. It's been a beautiful Monday, partly thanks to you, and we wish you the very best of the day, sir.
Thank you very much. Have a great week.
Thank you. And of course, we'll continue praying that everything goes well in sister country, Nigeria. But before we go, Sanitation Minister, that's in the Publisher newspaper, Sanitation Minister urges Jospon Group and others to invest in recycling of used vehicles. You can catch stories of that story in that newspaper. It's in the Publisher newspaper. There's also manager of Daughters of Glorious Jesus picks up NDC nomination forms. And that's his photo right there. Mr. Olympio, I believe. Yeah, he has picked up Kwame Olympio, manager of award-winning gospel group Daughters of Glorious Jesus, on Wednesday, 22nd February 2023, picked his forms to contest the upcoming parliamentary primaries for Trobu constituency on the ticket of the National Democratic Congress. Well, those are some of the stories there. On that note, we'd like to thank you so much for having joined us. Sports is up next, but just to let you know, this segment has been brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. Later on, we'll be telling you a bit more about them, or we might as well go ahead. They're offering free prostate screening and free female fertility screening. Locate them in Accra Spintex opposite the Shell signboard, Kumasi Kronum Abuehia, behind the Angel Educational Complex, Takrade Anaji State Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa and Esiama Enzima. Call 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But only the beginning of sports, and we'll definitely be telling you about how Manchester United, glory Manchester United, went on to beat Newcastle, which was very feisty. They had the larger chunk of possession, but they lost the Carabao Cup. And now Manchester United, for the 6th record time, has won the Carabao Cup. I know the Chelsea folk are bleeding, especially having bought the entire all the players in the world and yet not being able to get much rolling. They lost by 2-0. We'll bring you the scoop on all of that in sports. Do stay. Welcome back on the AM show. We've spoken about Ebola in the last few years, COVID-19 now, it is Lassa fever. The Ghana Health Service received notification of 2 confirmed Lassa fever cases from the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research on the 24th day of February 2023. Both cases reside right here in Accra. Now, the first case was a 40-year-old trader who was unwell for a period of about 2 weeks and finally died at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. May his soul rest in peace. The second case, who is a contact of the fatal case, is currently on admission, but is very stable. Now, we all know how contagious Lassa fever is. It's in the family of Ebola fever, or those hemorrhagic fevers. So far, 56 contacts have been identified and are being followed up on. Well, to discuss the situation and how to stem the tide of it locally, we have Dr. Fred Adomako Boateng, Bono East Director of Health. He joins the conversation. Doc, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Very good morning to you, my friend.
It's been a while since we had an interaction, and I'm glad you called me your friend. I'm glad you're this generous. But tell us, this is a grave concern. I want you to break it down to bite-sized levels. What effectively is Lassa fever? Please explain to our audience.
Thank you. So Lassa fever was first identified in a town in Nigeria, which we call Lassa. Actually, it's in the Bono State in Nigeria. And that's 1969. That was first identified over there. So that's the name Lassa fever. It's caused by a virus. And that virus is in the family of Ebola, as you rightly said, and Marburg. So it's also part of what we call the viral hemorrhagic fevers. So that's where we get Lassa fever virus from. And the resident or the host of Beta is actually a rat, African rat. That's where the virus lives. And when you get Lassa fever, what will show? Typically, it comes with what we call fever. That's the name. That's how come it's Lassa fever. So it comes with fever and then general weakness, general malaise. That you say, I am not well, I'm not feeling well. That is the state that you really get. That's the initial stages where you get the virus. Then as it progresses, you have headaches, you have sore throats, you have severe muscle pain and joint pain, you cough, you have diarrhea, abdominal pain, and the extreme cases, and normally that's what people look at. You will tend to bleed from the other orifices, from the nose, from melena stools, and that is the extreme cases that normally people associate with some of these. But typically speaking, you will see that the presentation is not any different from simple malaria and the other enteric fevers that we do have. So that is the signs and symptoms of the virus. And how do you get it? You rightly said that it's highly contagious. Yes, that comes in relatively as compared to the COVID and other things that we see. But how would somebody get the virus that will then progress to the disease? You get it when you come in contact with the feces and the urine of the infected rats. So simply put, you are in your house, you don't cover your food well, you are in an environment where we don't have proper waste disposal, and then we throw all things around. Then it means that we are going to give access to the rats. And when they come, by the activities, and we will leave some of these things. And when we take it, that's when we become infected with that. So that's from the disease of an animal coming to man, the so-called zoonosis. And we believe we have been discussing this over, that as we begin to encroach on the ecosystem of where the animals are living, and we are also going to share their diseases. And this is what we call the One Health concept, that we should begin to look at the whole system in its entirety, man, animal, and all the others. And so when I get it, that's the most important thing. How do I give it to somebody? Because normally it's difficult to really pinpoint where the first case actually got the disease. But I have to state that Lassa fever is endemic in some of the countries.
Right.
It's endemic in Nigeria. It's endemic in Sierra Leone, Liberia. Those countries, it's kind of, they are living with it. So as we say, malaria is also endemic in Ghana. And so in some countries, Ghana, once in a while, we have sporadic cases. Like in 2011, we had one in Ashanti. So once in a while, we have these sporadic cases coming. But if you look at where we are going, it's not it's a bad evil. It's not a worse evil. Why am I saying that? In terms of the transmission from man to man, I can only pass Lassa fever virus to you when you come in contact with my body fluids.
With what? With what?
My body, and I will explain.
Did you say bodily fluids?
Body or bodily fluids.
Okay.
Your blood, your urine, your feces. You don't get it by casual direct contacts. I have to emphasize that. You get it when you come in contact with the body fluids of people who are showing signs and symptoms of Lassa fever. And so we will come to how you prevent it. And it's very crucial that we take note of that. So when people are vomiting in healthcare facilities, having loose stools, you are going to do a procedure that will put you at risk in coming in contact with those bodily fluids that we have enumerated. Then there is a risk. So, and you don't even get it from a person unless the person begins to show signs and symptoms of Lassa fever. So this is how you pass it on from one person to other. So when it comes to us, it's important the way that we prevent the disease. I think we'll go to that. So this is the mode of transmission from the animal reservoir or host rats. And now, if you have cats, it's very come in handy because the cats will deal with all the rats that you have in the house. But some people really don't have the cat. So, and we don't like cats. So these are ways that one will get the virus. And as we have stated, when you have the virus, how would it show? It will show, and it's important we talk about this. Look, there are a lot of diseases that present like Lassa fever. Our good friend malaria presents like that. So what is important here? It's important, and that is what the Director General Ghana Health Service has sent a notice to all of us. And we sent it to all our district and medical directors, what we call the case definition. Why would you suspect this person is having what? Lassa fever. So the signs are there. You have fever, general malaise, general body unwellness. That is usually how it starts. Then as it progresses, headache, sore throat, cough, sore myalgia, and COVID and all these present like that. So it's important that we have to confer that. And then extreme cases are what we call these bleeding from the orifices, therefore putting them into the disease bracket of viral hemorrhagic fever, Marburg, Ebola, and all the other categories. So this is how you get it, and this is how you present it.
Right.
The most important point is how do you prevent it.
Right. We'll be getting there, and I'll have to go back a bit to some of the points you made earlier. But when it gets to the point where the person is bleeding, it means the person has gone through all these phases: fever, general malaise, headache, sore throat, cough, and finally the bleeding comes through. It doesn't mean when you get to that point. What stage is that? Is that end stage? Can it still be dealt with at that stage? I just want a quick understanding before we move on.
Yeah, so we have specific treatment for Lassa. We use antivirals, and it's most effective when initiated at the beginning of people having signs and symptoms.
Right.
And then we assess them that they will go on. It's very important that you initiate the treatment as early as possible. And that is why we are having discussion. Because if you wait till that latter stage, the case fatality is really, really high. But I have to say that for all people having Lassa fever, it's only 1% that will die. That is a good prognosis.
I see.
For all the Lassa fever cases that you have, if only 1% of them are likely, statistically, are going to, if you don't manage it well, will die. And so early and prompt initiation of treatment is very important. And that's why we are having all these discussions. That you don't go and you buy malaria, anti-malaria, you are not well, you buy this, you are not well. It means that you are progressing the course of the illness, which will make survival very difficult, as we have stated.
So if you're having fever-like symptoms and all of that, do not self-medicate. Go seek help from a medical facility. But then that also means that while Lassa fever is a hemorrhagic disease, in terms of fatality, it is different from Ebola, for example, because the fatality rate of Ebola is much higher from what I know.
Yes, and that's why I'm saying that this is one of the worst bad Ebolas as compared to Ebola. If there's an adjective to describe something as a worst Ebola or bad or good Ebola. So in terms of the case fatality, Lassa fever is not as deadly as Ebola. But we have to admit that if you get to the severer forms, then it means that the likelihood of surviving is also slim. But the earlier, the better. But in terms of case fatality, it comes nowhere near Ebola and then Marburg disease.
Right. I'll leave the prevention bit for the latter bit of the conversation. So just to clarify, when you say these rodents, does it include bats, for example, which are maybe not technically in that group, but we've known that they are also hosts of such diseases? Does it include them? And when we're talking about fecal matter and urine and all of that, how about consuming the rodents? If you cook them properly, does that mean, and if you touch whatever, but you wash your hands and all of that? I just need this clarification. I'm sure there are a lot of people, as you know, who consume the Bailers and the Cusiers and the rest. What are the implications for such people?
Okay, so the main culprit here is rats. The rats that the rodents, as you said. But it's not really implicated when it comes to Lassa fever. The other forms of transmission, but they are very slim. Okay. Very slim, like sexually transmitted is even less than 1. But the major root is when you come, and what you said, how do you get it? You get it when you come in contact with the bodily fluids, feces, and the urine. So that is what will prone you to have it, not the eating. So if you are going to eat and it's properly cooked and you are not going to get in contact with this body fluid, getting in touch, touching your mouth, touching it and scrubbing your nose and eyes. You see, that's the root of the transmission. So normally you see what we call fecal-oral, like diseases of cholera, where you actually eat and get it. The mode of transmission is quite different because here is the body fluids which are contaminated. That is going to prone you into getting the disease. So that is how the transmission will occur when we get in contact. So we will advise that now be careful as a hunter. If you permit me to say, don't be a lazy hunter. Don't go for the dead ones, which are having problems and touching their body fluids. I mean, so these are some of the things that we have to bring the difference. It's the bodily fluids, and that's what we said. And at times it's difficult. We will come to that environmental control.
Okay.
So Ghana Health Service is also liaising with other environmental. So we'll come back to hygiene, the way we dispose of our waste, and we cover them around. That will let these rodents multiply and become closer to us. So these are major things that we have to look at: disposal of our waste, covering of our waste bins and all over, so that these rodents, rats, will not have the opportunity to come. And when they come, where do they? They lay their feces, urine around, which is difficult to see actually, and if you don't take particular care. So that is where we will have to draw the line. But the point is, how do you know that what you are consuming, the fluid is properly cooked and all those? So that's what we have to also look at.
For man-to-man transmission, you spoke about blood, urine, or fecal matter. I just had to ask, how about phlegm from the body? And what if the phlegm contains blood? Because sometimes you hawk phlegm and it contains blood. Or even without blood, is it possible as well?
Yes, it's a body fluid. It's part of it. So, and that's why you can wear those masks. So any fluid that is coming from the body.
Does that include sweat?
Sweat has not been implicated, and that when we spit has not been implicated much as compared to the blood, the urine, the feces, and as you said, the phlegm, cough. I mean, it will contain a higher concentration of that. So, and especially these are very important when it comes to the health setting, that you have to be careful when you are dealing with, because it's in the health setting that we are exposed to having huge quantities of this. You can see that somebody is not really well and vomiting all over. Somebody is not well and passing stools all over, and the sphincters are loose. This hardly you will see in our normal day activity as we go around. So you see, one of the major settings that we see is the health setting, and therefore now DG has sent this notice that we have to insist on barrier nursing. And so one of the main modality of preventing spread when it comes to Lassa is that in the health facility, isolate the patients. Don't add the patient who you are suspecting to have Lassa with the other general patients. So we isolate them. And that's what we are also saying, that in the house, when we are taking care of people, I mean, you might not know what is the cause of all the problems that they are turning face. It's important that this barrier nursing, because you also take care of the sick in the house. Be careful that you don't come in contact, because you don't know the breach, where you have the breach on the skin, on the face, or wherever that this fluid will have access, which contains the virus.
We know of this case of the 40-year-old trader who unfortunately has met his demise upon contracting this hemorrhagic disease, and then the other contact. But there are some 56 other contacts that have been identified going through quarantine processes and all of that. We also know that the Director General of the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Kumar Bwaje, has instituted measures across the board to ensure that the virus is restrained in terms of the national, regional, and district breakdowns. But what usually happens in this instance? Break it down for us. How exactly, I'm sure people would be wondering, how exactly are health services working hand in glove to stem the tide of the virus? What exactly is the plan? What are you doing right now?
So what we are doing is that we have to really congratulate and then applaud the Accra and team, the hospitals. You know now we have heightened alertness of this disease. Those times, by the time we realize it's almost all over, and like we are chasing a fire. The first thing that we will have to do, like you are saying, is that who are the contacts? It's important that the contacts are listed, what we have done. And what do we do? Because we know, as the science is telling us, people are only problem when they show signs and symptoms. So I can be exposed, Ben, you can be exposed. But so far as we are not showing signs and symptoms, we have to be monitored. And that's what the service is doing. You check on them in the morning, in the evening. The moment they begin to show signs and symptoms, and that's where the fear is, because that is when they can only pass the virus. Then you have to test them. These are the measures that have been put in place. But if you ask me about this case, I would say the prognosis is positive. Because if you look at the time this person got it, and we have not even gotten another case from that person, it means that in terms of the way that is easily passed around, it's a bit difficult. And look at the people who got it. People who really came in contact, very direct contact. So I would say that, look.
And these people, by the way, very likely had no idea that this person had contracted Lassa fever. They had no knowledge of staying away or maybe even handling the person in a certain way so that bodily fluids wouldn't be exchanged.
Yes, so that is what I would say, that the positive side that I would say, look. And this is a caution to all our health workers that, look, it's important that we value the lives of our patients, our staff, because one day we will also be. But always, I tell my nurses, I tell my doctors, please, this is what we call standard precautions. And the standard precaution is that you assume that any person that you are dealing with, it can be Dr. Fred Adomako Boateng, regional director, who is not welcoming to your hospital. But you assume that any person that you are dealing with is likely to have what? A pathogen that the person can give to you. And it's also likely you also have harboring some pathogen that you can give to the person. And therefore, standard precautions are standard precautions. Regardless of whatever you are dealing with, we make sure that they are firmly implemented across all facilities in the service, because we have to be strong to take care of the sick. So that is what DJ, and if you really read the notes that DJ has sent around, he was really emphatic on that. Strict infection prevention and control and barrier measures should be instituted across all board. And especially, the powerful thing that you can always do is hand hygiene. Washing your hand with running water and soap, alcohol, is able to prevent 70% of healthcare infections, or what people know as nosocomial infections. So that is what we will say. But if you tell me prognosis, very good. Looking at where we have come from, and this particular index case, how even close members have not come down with the disease is something that we should be happy about.
It's interesting.
We shouldn't rest. As we said, the normal things should be done. Contact tracing, list them, follow them up. When they develop signs and symptoms, as we have said, isolate them. And if there is a need for us to treat them, you treat them, because that's when the prognosis. We shouldn't stop doing all those things, but make sure we do that and then follow up with all.
You spoke about how endemic it is to some parts of Africa, especially the West African sub-region, Guinea, Nigeria, among other places. You spoke about cats. My mind just went back to that. Are you suggesting that the cats can't get infected and can't pass it on to men in case they consume these rats? I just want to...
No, the cats are not known to pass. So if you read the notes, keeping of cats at this time become very important and handy.
I see. Okay.
And then, so if you are a lover, of course, they will make sure they devour all of them, and then if you don't, but it's one of the advantages in this particular situation.
I guess we all should start getting some cats. In severe cases, as we've been told, there could be bleeding from the orifices of the body, mouth, nose, even the vagina and the stomach, among other parts of the body. But, so you made mention of something. I don't know whether I heard you say vaccine at a point, because it is said that there is no vaccine that protects against Lassa fever. I think you said something, anti-vaccine or antiviral. Can you explain?
Antiviral. The antiviral is the medication.
Right.
Rabivarin. That's what we use to treat. But we don't have any vaccines, like the Pfizer vaccines for COVID, like the Moderna for COVID, like yellow fever vaccines. For Lassa fever, we don't have any proven vaccines yet. But when you get the disease, a specific treatment. You know, normally, initially, we are saying COVID and other disease, we support you. We didn't have specific treatment. So the supportive treatment is when you have fever, we give you medicine that will take care of the fever. When you have pain, we give you. But in this particular case that we are talking, we have specific antiviral that will kill the virus itself. And that's what we call specific treatment that we Rabivarin. So, and that is effective in the earlier stage when people start showing signs and symptoms and you don't progress to. But I have to say that the name, the viral hemorrhagic fever, with experience, actually has not lived up to expectation for some of us. And because we say viral hemorrhagic fever, most of the time people are waiting till they see the blood from, oh, my friend, it's too late. And most of the presentations now even will not present that. From Ebola now, we realize that Ebola, the leading cause of symptom that we saw in Ebola was vomiting and even diarrhea. So now the bloody issues that were akin to these diseases are not really shown. And that's why we will have to be careful that we don't wait. So we are actually lumped in the viral hemorrhagic fever, yes, and we believe for all the possible orifices that we can think of, yes, but we shouldn't wait. And that's the body fluid of an infected person who is showing signs and symptoms, as we have enumerated, even the urine. That normally we don't talk about. The feces and other things, and the blood should be taken into consideration very well when we are dealing with these.
All right, so two quick points to wrap the conversation. Is there any group or are there any groups that are most at risk when it comes to contracting Lassa fever? Are there? And secondly, what would be the mode of prevention? Apart from those you've mentioned, what are the modes of prevention? Walk us through them.
So those who are at risk, one, the people who are living in endemic areas.
So do we have endemic areas in Ghana? Endemic parts?
No, so we are also at risk because we are closer to these endemic areas. So in terms of the global world, the people who are living in the endemic areas are at risk. And we, Ghana, if you read the literature, we are also at risk because we are having them. And it shows, once in a while, we have 1, 2. So, and then secondly, people who, the pregnant women, especially when they are in their 3rd trimester, that is from the 36 going there, they are also people who are also at higher risk when it comes to
when you say 36 weeks?
Yes.
Right.
36 weeks. The first one is 1 to 12, 13 to 26 is second, and 26 there. So these are the people who are at risk in terms of getting, and then the severity of the cases. And as usual, health workers, we are also at risk, especially when the disease is manifested around. Right. This is what I will say. What do we do? Prevention is better than cure. Environmental sanitation, hygiene, all of us in your house, in the community that we live in. That's the first one. And 2,
And that also includes regular hand washing, sanitizing
yes,
as well.
Yes, that is why I am coming to that. So if you don't take care and also you are exposed to that, so that you don't pass it on, and then you don't leave it around. We said you can pass it through your feces and others. So sorry if proper hand hygiene. Then hand hygiene is so crucial in everything that we talk about. And by now, hand hygiene should be part and parcel of our lives. You remember when Ebola COVID came, almost everywhere you saw people having their hand sanitizer stuck to their bed holes. We don't know. It should be part of our lives. Everywhere we are going, you should use it. And when it comes to the health facilities also, we should use it. And then nose mask. Please, when you are coughing now, we know that it's now part and parcel of our lives. Use it. When you use the washroom and you come, wash your hands because you are going to touch or somebody is also going to touch.
And Doc, that is one of, I simply can't grasp. I see a lot of people using washrooms without washing their hands. Everywhere I go, people are using washrooms. Maybe some people think, oh, I just went to urinate. I didn't, go and
let's
put out excrement. And they are not washing their hands.
Let's do this project, me and you, Ben and Fred, our project for making sure. It can be something. Let's talk about it. Let's have a drive on that.
Right.
So that we make this hand hygiene be part and parcel of us. So subconsciously, that is where we have not gotten to, where it becomes culture. You understand? Let's make it a project, and I think it's something that let's discuss. And maybe
this would be one of the easiest projects for me because everyone here knows how often I wash my hands.
Let's talk about it. Champions who do champion everywhere we go, they demonstrate this, and I think it will sip in, and it's part of us. We abort a lot of diseases that we don't know.
Right.
We do a lot that we cannot see. And you see, we are all starting talking, making noise and all that. But the other things that are supposed to be done, me and you, we have the power to do that. Then the other big things, we leave for the other people who handle them for us. And then I'll come to my health workers, please. Standard precautions are standard precautions. Let's adhere to them. And we know isolation. People who start presenting, vomiting, coughing, you know what to do. Let's stick to them and ensure that we are safe to take care of the people of Ghana. Thank you.
Doc, thank you so much. And lovely suggestion. I'll speak to my producer and we will see what we can do in this regard. Not just for Lassa fever, not just for COVID-19, but who knows, like Doc is saying, there are things that you could get rid of simply by washing your hands and you wouldn't even know that they were on your hands or you had these germs, so to speak. But that's the latest on the Lassa fever situation. 2 people affected. One of them has passed on to glory. The other one is has been detained with some 56 other contacts being monitored. That is the situation on the ground, especially here in Accra in respect of this latest outbreak of Lassa fever, if I can call it an outbreak, which is being contained by our health services. But all of us need to be on the lookout. You see those symptoms, you call the medical services. Don't just go touching people like that when you see them with some of these symptoms. And one thing that has not been mentioned, which Doc mentioned, phlegm as well. It's a bodily fluid. You have to watch how you touch people who have these symptoms and who are emitting phlegms. You have to watch that. Well, that's the latest on the Lassa fever scourge. Stay with us. We're going to be returning shortly on the AM show. We'll talk about NUGS, which is asking the Student Loan Trust Fund to, as a matter of urgency, release funds to applicants for the current academic year. NUGS President Dennis Labi is going to be our guest shortly on the AM show. Do stay. Thank you for staying with us on the AM show. In a statement dated yesterday, the National Union of Ghana Students had some thoughts to share on the student loans that had not been paid. It's captioned it, "Pay student loans immediately." We'll be bringing you that statement, just as we can take a bit of a reader so you can see it on your screens as well. But it basically, in essence, said the National Union of Ghana Students had received several complaints from students nationwide about the non-payment of student loans after a long period of application. And they noted that this was unfortunate and that last semester arrears had also not been paid. And this was a big problem in the face of the current situation in the country, with students facing an inability to register and continue their academic activity. It went on to say at the moment about 70,000 students have applied. It's even more worrying to know that some institutions have noticed or have issued notices warning students of closing the closed registration deadline. An example is the University of Business and Integrated Development in WA, among others. They also go on to talk about KNUST, among others. But that is the situation that is replicated across the length and breadth of the country and affecting the membership of NUCS. Well, joining us for that conversation, we have the President, Dennis Labi. Mr. Labi, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you, sir.
It's been a while since we had a conversation on education-related matters. Thank you for joining us. Now, walk us through what exactly the situation is as far as the non-payment of student loans is concerned. How bad is it?
Thank you very much. I'm grateful that you would have time to do this story with us. I think that the National Union of Ghana Students has been quiet over the student loan debacle over some time. That is purely because we have opted to use a lot of the backroom conversations, trusting that it will yield some fruitful results. But unfortunately for us, from last semester to date, we have about 70,000 Ghanaian students sitting on the system of the Student Loan Trust Fund. 70,000 is the figure who have not been paid. What that means is that in a time-bound payment, which such as the school fees, then you have a lot of students in anxiety, a lot of students risking deferment due to the non-payment of these loans. That is our worry at this point, because if you consider the single most important barrier to tertiary enrollment in Ghana, which is cost, one of the very sustainable ways of ensuring that this cost barrier is eliminated, and then that would be the sustenance or the effectiveness of our student loan systems. But unfortunately for us, students have applied student loan from last semester. They've not received payment. This semester, they've not received payment. It is worrying to also note, like we mentioned in our press statement, that this semester's situation is causing us much more worries because registration is about to close. For some institutions, it's even closed. For a university like University of Cape Coast, it has closed. Imagine a student who depends on the Student Loan Trust Fund to pay fees. It is a difficult situation for such a student. Unfortunately for us, a school like KNUST is writing exams today. Next semester exams is today. University for Business Integrated Development Studies, UBIT, WA, is also issued warning notices to students that they risk deferring if they do not pay their fees. And a lot of these students depends on this student loan. So our office has received petitions from the local secretariats we have across the countries, the student representative councils we have across the country, and ordinary students. If you enter our emails or our inboxes, you realize that there are tons of messages coming from students bemoaning the situation they find themselves in. The situation is critical because second semester is in arrears and this semester is in arrears. Our troubles are compounded because, unlike previous times when there was no guarantor policy, or there was no guarantor policy, where students would have to get a guarantor before they apply, that meant that it limited the number of students who could apply for the student loan. But as we speak, the government has instituted the no guarantor policy.
Right.
That means that with just the Ghana card, a Ghanaian student can apply for student loan. That has doubled the enrollment or the application. And now there is a lot of pressure on the system. The only way out is for improved funding for the scheme to ensure that students do not miss out or defer their courses of study.
With that point, and I was about to get to exactly that, the no guarantor system that has now been instituted, would you say it's been a blessing or a curse? Of course, once the opportunities are there, many more people who are in need may come on board. But there's also the other side to the argument that some people who may not necessarily be in need may come and crowd out those who genuinely have a need. So from where you sit, has this served its purpose? Looking at the consequences you have to grapple with now.
Ordinarily, would the no grantor policy would have been a blessing. Ordinarily, it's a good thing. We are at this point because of the funding gap. If there is enough funding or there is funding provided for the student loan trust fund, I'm not sure we would be at the point where we are contemplating payments, whether it's been a good thing or not. We wouldn't have been at this point. But then we are at this point purely because of funding gap. What do? Instead of bemoaning the institution of a good policy, I think that we should be looking at closing the funding gap, because the no guarantor policy is good, because then genuinely students who do not have guarantors can also access the loan. Mind you, applicants of the loan are usually from very poor backgrounds or very low income backgrounds, where it is even difficult to find a public servant or someone in the capacity to serve as a guarantor. Imagine an orphan who does not have a mother or a father, who then that person genuinely needs the loan. If that person is not getting a guarantor, that person cannot apply for the loan. So ordinarily, we believe that the no guarantor policy is good. The only challenge is that the no guarantor policy must come with a financial sustainability plan, which we are not seeing in this situation. So then it brings us to the crowding out of the people who genuinely need it. But then we believe that whatever the situation is, no good policies must not be backtracked by financial or funding challenges, because education is at the heart of the development of this country, and hence investment must be made. That is why we bemoaned when the budget was laid. We bemoaned the decline in investment or the decline in the funding of education in this country, i.e. tertiary education. And that is why we've raised the red flag of the cap placed on Get Fund, because Get Fund releases money to student loan, but now Get Fund is unable to release enough funding to student loan, and then it becomes a problem for us as students. So in the short while, how do we move forward? We move forward by ensuring that there is funding provided for the student loan. Because mind you, student loan is doing about 50% recoveries. So the total recoveries of the loan is 50%, which is one of the highest rates in the world by any student loan system. But the challenge and why they are unable to fund or pay loans, according to the information we have, is that they don't have money. And why don't they have money? Because the numbers we are recording now is huge. It tells you that genuinely people need a loan. It's just a matter of not having money to pay them. But then we query that what is the essence of giving somebody a loan to pay the fees when the person has already deferred? So fees comes with time. Hence the loan must commensurate or must agree with the timeline of school fees payment. Because if at the end of the day we don't agree or it doesn't come in line with the payment of school fees, and it is always going to come after payment of school fees, then it becomes a problem for students to rely on the student loan.
Tell me, you talk about some 70,000 students who have applied, who are affected. Averagely, how much are these students going for in real terms? How much are they going for? I know the dynamics are different based on the institutions they find themselves in, but how much averagely are they going for? What is the real impact? How many people do you know, for example, who have had to defer as of this point in time?
Okay, so if you look at the number of students or applicants, the amount designated varies according to your application. It's not just about the institution final something. It's also according to your application. There is a metric or there is a system that varies and assigns students. The maximum each student is eligible to have is 3,000 Ghana cedis. 3,000 Ghana cedis, which we have also called for an increment because it is woefully inadequate to cover fees, accommodation, books, and what have you. That notwithstanding, let's deal with the 3,000 we have now. If you consider the number of deferments we have in our various institutions, you realize that the highest percentage has to do with cost. And a lot of these cost barriers could have been eliminated if our student loan system was effective and was catering for the needs of students. So as we speak now, the maximum amount a student is eligible to is 3,000 Ghana cedis. This is based on individual situations or the application filed by the students. 2, we have about 70,000 students sitting in the system who we owe. 3, second semester arrears have not even been paid. 4, students, as we speak now, KU University is writing exams starting today. Some schools have even closed applications or registration. Some schools have sent warning notices to our students, and hence we are at the risk of extra deferment if something is not done immediately and urgently.
You made mention of the numbers that have increased about twofold, but have there been any reasons cited by the Student Loan Trust Fund in your interactions with them? Is that the reason they cite, or are there other circumstances that we do not know of?
I think that their main reason or the main challenge with the student loan as we speak now for non-payment is purely a matter of funding.
So basically funding from government, because yes, the trust fund has its own management schemes to manage, the resources that it puts out and what comes back in. But basically, it comes from government. So that is where the problem lies.
Yes, that's true. So you have ordinarily it's a recovery fund. It's a revolving fund where payments are made from creditors or people who owe the scheme, and then some sourcing from the Get Fund is added. Then hopefully from the government or the ministry too is added. But now those monies are not coming. Then secondly, you have an increase in applications. So if previously you were servicing just about 20,000 students, or you had just about 20,000 applicants, now the challenge is that you have about 70,000 applicants. So what you may have to do is that your recoveries are constant. The people you've loaned out will not increase because your applicants have increased. But then you would have to shore up, or you would have to move your Get Fund or the government of Ghana allocation or funding that comes in. If that does not happen, then it becomes a problem because you have a funding gap. You have a funding gap of the difference, because the difference has been occasioned by the introduction of the no guarantor policy. And then it makes the no guarantor policy seem like it shouldn't have come, which I don't believe so. It is an elimination of a barrier. It is the solving of a problem. But when you solve the problems, it introduces you to new dimensions of challenges that you need to solve. And then preparations for sustainability and funding gap should be considered.
All right.
But that's why we are here. It's unfortunate.
Right, Dennis. So to cap off the conversation, what is the next step? You've issued the statement. You're speaking about it on national television. What is the next step, especially as some of these students are at their wits' end? Some have had to defer. Some will have to defer. Others are still waiting on the trust fund to come through for them. What is the next step of NUCS on this matter?
For us at the National Union of Ghana Students, we would continue to engage the government, the Student Loan Trust Fund managers, and the institutions. We are speaking to the institutions to have some level of clemency and then give our students some time so that our students make up, and whilst we engage government and we engage the fund managers to make up for the payment. But then we will beg the institutions that if it is possible, which we know, let there be extensions in the deadline for payment of fees. Our students are not happy that they've not paid their fees. They are not enjoying that they are being sent notices. It is unfortunate that a lot of them risk deferment, but we are pleading with the management of the various institutions. These are young people who depend solely on systems or the safety nets provided by the state. And if these safety nets are not being sustained or they are not helping, the best we can do is to some level of empathy or clemency for these students. We will do our best to continue to engage the government to ensure that the monies are released. But then we will also get back and develop our next lines of actions beyond what I have stated, and then we would outline it to let the Ghanaian people know. But then we will continue to be relentless in our advocacy to ensure that students are protected and the funds are released immediately for them.
Thank you, Dennis, for joining the conversation. That is NUG's president, Dennis Labi, who joined us to share his thoughts on those 70,000 applicants who are waiting with bated breath for support from the Student Loan Trust Fund. Their fate hangs in the balance. Well, stay with us on the AM show, because speaking of fate, we have another entity, in fact, a bigger country, the biggest democracy in Africa, one of the biggest across the world. I'm talking about Nigeria. They went to the polls on Saturday, largely peaceful, but with a number of incidents that we could have avoided, all of us, or we pray would have been avoided. In that instance, it's a straight tie between the APC, the PDP, and the Labour Party. But how are things going? What is the latest? Are any results trickling in, and what can we expect? That conversation on the Nigerian election back in the studio when we return after the break. Do stay with us. Well, that's from our collaboration with Channels TV, of course, giving us the scoop on this matter. The interesting bit in there, for the first time since 1999, we have another contender in the person of Peter Obi, like he mentioned, former governor of Anambra State, who is representing the Labour Party and has come out as quite a force. The other interesting bit, whoever secures the most votes would only become president if that person also secured 25% of 2/3 of the votes from Nigeria's 36 states. And that gives you quite a picture of how different their electoral system is. But joining us for this conversation this morning, we have Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante. He's a political scientist, also the director for the Center for European Studies at the University of Ghana. He joins the conversation. Dr. Asah-Asante, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, my brother. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining the conversation. Let's start.
And good morning to our sister country, Nigeria. I wish them all the best.
Awesome. We do wish them. In fact, that is a nation very close to my heart, apart from Ghana, that is. I've spent quite a bit of time in that country. But let's talk about the Nigerian elections 2023. How important are these elections in the life of Nigeria, especially in this republic?
Yeah, if you look at Nigerian election, has always been an important election because talk about numbers, all right? It is the most populous country in Africa in terms of economic, wherewithal. Nigeria is big. In terms of military might, Nigeria is big. And by all definition, Nigeria is big, all right? So anything about Nigeria is big to Africa, big to the sub-region, big to the world. And given the fact that all these countries, including Nigeria, have gone through military regimes for a very long time, until such a time that democracy, through the third wave, has started gaining some roots. So every election on the continent, in the sub-region, and in this case in Nigeria, is critical and important to all of us because we want democracy to be strengthened. We want democracy to grow so that at least, if anything at all, we are going to get the fruits of democracy and make sure that our sub-region, our continent is free from all the evils of authoritarian regimes. So Nigerian election, by all standards, is so critical and so important, and it is an enterprise worth pursuing wherever we find ourselves as human beings.
Thank you for that background. I'll be coming to you shortly, but let me also bring in Ikemesit Effiong, Head of Research at SBM Intelligence. Ikemesit, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation. I can't hear you. I think you may have to unmute.
Oh, okay. All right then. Good morning and thank you for having me.
Great, great. And if I butchered your name, this would be an apt time for you to correct me.
It was the same first, but I'll allow you pass.
Okay. So let's get into where exactly do you find yourself currently? I want to know so we can situate the conversation. And what can you share with us from Saturday till now? INEC has told us about preparations. It has shown us footage, pictures of, electoral documents and all of that it has had ready for the elections. But on election day in many places, I remember the WTO boss, Dr. Ngozi, went and voted. And where she voted, it took over 3 hours before voting started. This was replicated in a few other places, but voting did go on. And the numbers that turned out, massive, some of those, the highest we have seen within this period since 1999. But what is the latest that you can tell us in respect of the Nigerian election?
Okay, so I'm currently in Lagos, Nigerian market, and I think really the story of the election. First, I should say, collation and some results, right? I've started filtering through some states already being called in terms of where the presidential contest currently stands right now. The establishment party candidates, I think, are at least 3 states, and right now, having a lot of collation will happen today. So by the end of today, we would have a much clearer idea about whether there's a first round winner in this election cycle, or if the staring at the possibility of the second round. But really, in the end, I think the story of this election has really been one about INEC's logistical challenges. Just as you alluded to, Ngozi waited for hours before she was able to vote. I believe that was in Anambra State. According to our own tally at SBM Intelligence, which we released on Saturday, 6% of the polling units that we monitored didn't open on time, and were delays in ballot materials, as well as polling unit officers getting to the various polling units right across the country. I have reports from even the nation's capital, where people voted well into the night, right? For Richards, for example, that 12:25 a.m. in one of the suburbs, right, of the national capital, and voting had to be extended, right, and for voting had to be extended, right, in about 16 Nigerian states well into Sunday, right, and that just underscores the fact that despite the years of preparation that INEC has had, despite the copious amounts of financial support that they got out of the federal court, and earlier appearance here on your channel, I think we put up those graphics and those numbers about what INEC spending has been. In this cycle alone, INEC allocated 350 billion naira. I don't know how much that is Sebidi, but it's a tidy penny in order to manage this electoral contest. And it appears as though for every election management metric that you look at, right, INEC has performed. And we are looking at a situation where even though lots of people showed up at their polling units, many of them may not have had the opportunity to actually cast their ballots. Initial indications are that official turnout numbers are in the mid 30%, which is putting us on course to match, voter turnout totals from the last election in 2019, which is a record low for a Nigerian election, I should add. but we think that that's indicative of, actual voter interest, which we actually thought was quite high in this cycle. But all of those logistical challenges, also there were technical glitches with some of the accreditation machines in a lot of polling units spread right across the country as well. That also hampered voting right in terms of polling units. So I think the dominant story in this cycle has just been that from a logistical standpoint, INEC did not put its best foot forward, and it appears as though many Nigerians may have been operationally disenfranchised as a result.
Right. When you look at the signals so far, I have seen the Western media, among others, purporting that Peter Obi, the former Anambra State governor, was in pole position if the youth turned out in their numbers to lead the country. Has that been the case in terms of the voter turnout that you speak of?
So we don't have quantitative data yet to sort of to give a very accurate picture right around what the demographic turnout has been in these particular elections. Anecdotally, it would appear as though voter is high across demographics, but also particularly with respect to the security of Nigeria's electorate, right? So, people under the age of 34. I think the post-mortem on that turnout would really only begin to occur after sort of all the numbers have come in, and we have a very clear idea of who exactly voted in this cycle. I suppose my primary concern as a researcher statistician is that because of operational challenges, many people who initially showed up at polling units and waited hours, but eventually probably had to leave, or the polling officers had to suspend it for the day. And then if your polling unit was open on Sunday, many people not taking that opportunity to come means that in the end, women have added a picture, right, about how voting interest and the voter appetite and people actually showing up at polling units translated into actual votes, right? Really at the end of this. I'll give you sort of a quick example. So one of the states that has been called right for the presidential election contest is Katsina State. If you're fit in Nigerian politics, you know that that's the home state of the current president. The People's Democratic presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar has been called as winning that state. Right. So that's a significant flip, from sort of the ruling party to the opposition column. But his total vote share was about a little over 400,000 votes.
Okay.
When
so Ike
President Buhari won that state
pardon my having to do this, Ike.
Okay.
Pardon my having to do this. We have another guest who has to take leave of us. So with your permission, I will just move on to Dr. Asa Asante briefly, and I'll come back to you. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Thank you. Dr. Asa Asante, my apologies. I know you have a class to get to. When you look at the Nigerian elections, we've spoken about the importance of it, how crucial it is for our sub-region and the entire African continent. But what do you make of the developments so far, the positive and the negative? How well has INEC, fared for you this time round? And when you look at the late start to voting in some areas, the violence that has characterized elections in some areas, ballot boxes snatched, what picture does it paint for you from the political standpoint? And what are your expectations going forward? Hello, Dr. Asa Asante.
Yes, I can hear you. Hello?
Did you get the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you get the question?
Yes, I got the question.
Please go ahead.
Yes, I do. If you look at the election, it has suffered a number of challenges, as my colleague Ike has already enumerated them. Issue of the pre-election phase, we've seen issue of violence, we've seen issues of security problems, logistical problems, and a host of other problems. For instance, if you look at Labour Party's candidates, some of them did not have their names on the ballot, but that has been cleared, that the party refused to submit their names, and that is the cause of that. But the issues of, election management problems have reared their ugly heads, and that's creating a problem for the election, the late start of the election and all that. These things go a long way to affect election one way or the other, where people, if you read BBC reports, they've been in queues for a very long time and the rest of them. But the good news is also that people have the tenacity for purpose. They'll be able to, stand there and then cast their ballots. They've been able to also get themselves in the process. And then the INEC is also working very hard that some of the lingering challenges, it's addressing them. Issues of accusation, they quickly issue a press release like the Labour Party issue, and the rest of them. If you look at all these things, you realize that I am hoping that the election will be free and fair, and that people will be able to exercise their franchise as it's supposed to be. And then, so now we are in the election phase where voting is going on, counting is going on. I believe that we are not going to experience any incident. Already some of the polling stations, there have been shootings and all that. We believe that the security will be able to deal with this. And then when we get to the post-election phase, we want to pray and hope that there will also be peace prevailing there. If you look at so far what has transpired, I believe that if everything goes on, well, we are going to see interesting elections, even though the polls have suggested that there's a three-horse race between APC and PDP and Labour Party. But if you look at some of the polls, they put Obi on top because they believe that he commands a lot of large following in terms of the youth. If you look at the Nigerian youth, for instance, between age of 0 to 17, they have about 107 million people. If you look at the ages between 18 and 35, they have 59 million. Put the two together, it gives you an idea about 166 million people. You move on to 36, the age bracket of 36 to 53, they have about 32 million people. Even if you put the two together, you are running about 198 million against, eligible voters of about 87 million people. So you realize that those statistics are worth interrogating, because if the youth are to vote the way the predictions are going, then it should be a victory for, Labour Party Obi. But there are also the disbelief that it's fairly a new party and that is not able to marshal forces within the highly Islamized society of the North, where most of the votes that you need to be able to win a Nigeria election exist. So that is the challenge that you have. For the two candidates of Tinubu, APC, yes, he is a goddess of the southern area of the southwest region. And if you look at his showing and the recent BBC report a few minutes ago, that he's winning there, but the magnitude of victory, which is not that high, because we expect that in such areas, those two, the APC man and the PDP man should be able to have a lot, because the youth, if the youth dynamics is going to work, then it's going to divide the votes of these two people and then create a problem for them. So we expect that they'll put in their best and then get the results that we want. But I believe that it's early days yet, and that as the counting goes on, we are likely to see changes that will really inform us as to the focus and direction of the election. My prayer is that the security must be up and doing, which I'm sure they are on the ground and then doing the work as expected of them. And I also believe that, the election will move on freely and fairly so as to enable people to exercise their franchise the way it ought to be. But obviously, in an election like this, with the large numbers of people involved, you cannot gloss over the fact that there will be some aberrations that will come. But we want it to be minimal so that Nigeria will be able to weather the storm and that we don't have a repeat of the 2007 election with all the attendant problems.
Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, I'm sure that we'll have further opportunities to dilate on this matter. We know you have to run, but we're grateful that you've taken the time all the same to discourse with us on this all-important subject. And we wish you the best of the day, sir. Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante is a political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, also director of the Center for European Studies. Before I come back to you, Ike, we know from last night the BBC had been putting up some data of the latest electoral results, and we're talking about since last night, so this is not the very latest, but so far, per what the BBC has gathered in terms of live results, I mean, from a few hours ago, Bola Tinubu had secured about 65.38% of the votes, amounting to some 201,494. Just a drop in a bucket in terms of the numbers, about 93 million registered and over 84 million gunning to vote. So that is just a drop in a bucket. 29.06% for Atiku Abubakar, a perennial contender with 89,000 plus votes. And Peter Obi with 3.7% with 11,397. Then all the others put together 1.77%, amounting to some 5,462. And we also had Rabiu, another major businessman in the country, Rabiu Kwankwaso, with 0.09%, constituting some 264 votes. But mind you, the voting that has come out so far emanates from Bola Tinubu's strongholds, his areas, and that could also account for the numbers that we are seeing. But in terms of the votes distribution, like you can see, Bola Tinubu with 65+%, Atiku Abubakar with 29+%, Peter Obi with 3.7%, and the others with some 1.77%, apart from Rabiu Kwankwaso, who has 0.09%. Let me come now to Ike. So we heard, and thank you so much for holding for us, we heard Dr. Asah-Asante make mention of the numbers across the board in terms of Nigeria's population. But when you narrow it down, you would see that the youth element, the voting element, the qualification, 18 to 34, you're looking at over 37 million Nigerians. Then you're looking at the middle-aged constituency, over 33 million Nigerians. Then you come to the elderly groups, from 50 to 69, over 17 million, and then those above 70 years amounting to 5.2 million. But when you look at the youthful bracket, 37 million for those 18 to 34 and middle-aged 35 to 49, that would give you some 70 million plus voters. And this is the constituency that has fed into the Peter Obi narrative. What is the picture in Nigeria, and how do you feel this will reflect in this election?
So the first thing to recognize is that, while the four elements, right, certainly skews significant votes, Peter Obi and the Labour Party, it's by no means a homogeneous bloc from a voter attitude. And with this, we've done some election studies right in this cycle, and what you find is that the youth vote is actually quite diverse. So the upper percentile of that 18 to 34 distribution is where you see a lot of the contextual divides, right? Nigeria's political space really come into play. Right? There's so much more younger distribution, right, of that demographic, sort of wage and this category, is where sort of a lot of the potential will be voting, demographic, right, is housed. It's still, a few million people. I think it's in this cycle you had 10 million plus people who registered, right, for the first time. And out of those, almost 6 million of those, right, were within that teen to 34 demographic, right? So it's a very significant part of the voting electorate. Again, what's not very clear is how, and now a lot of those voters are first-time voters, or they are at best voting in an election cycle. And what has typically been sort of our observation, and we actually have some data, right, to corroborate this, is that, voting difficulties in voting, and especially election delays, right, tend to impact, veteran voters. So people who have voted in 2 to 3 and above election cycles, because they kind of have a baked-in expectation. They kind of know what to expect come election day, and they're often prepared for that. The data isn't very clear on how much younger voters, right, have in the lead up to the elections, how they were going to handle, delays, and sort of post-election day, how they actually handled, right. We do have anecdotal evidence that them were able to stick it through, but we don't know how much of that voting base that originally showed up at their first, those who showed up at their polling units, and then, for those who showed up at their polling units, how many of them were able to ride through 5, 6, 7, in some cases 8-hour delays before they got their ballots and they were able to cast them. And that, I suppose, will be the interesting story how this election is written. The Labour Party is already complaining. They were actually this party complaining about how, sort of INEC's logistical challenges may have impacted the election, and they called loudly for, for the extension of voting beyond sort of the 3 p.m. cutoff mark, which was originally earmarked on election day. INEC eventually obliged and actually extended voting well into Sunday in some polling units right across the country. But I'm just checking in with I was checking in with my colleagues right as, the professor was speaking. And, the Labour Party, as well as the People's Democratic Party, have literally just finished giving a press conference on national television, and they are still making those complaints. And so there's real anxiety and there's real concern, right, certainly on the political side, that, those issues in getting electoral materials into as many polling units as possible, and sort of expediting the process, and the technical challenges with the bimodal accreditation system, right, impacted real and actual turnout. And to my mind, I would not be surprised if a lot of the legal challenges that occur when we have all the results in post-election sort of hinge on this particular, point, right, around election legends.
Do you foresee that those electoral challenges, and we've seen some of them in the past, those legal challenges could lead to a rerun, especially on the back of how dire the situation has been in some parts? You mentioned that voting was extended. I heard 2:30 mentioned at a point in time, and that anyone in the queue would be allowed to vote. Then 3 o'clock was made mention of, and in some areas extended all the way to Sunday. Yet the complaints still remain. And when you look at the numbers, it does make sense. Could this lead to a legal hurdle for whoever is declared president at the end of the day?
Oh, I think it almost certainly will. I think even if the electoral process was, was managed more competently, right, and we saw less disruptions from, an operational and a logistical, and even from a security standpoint, I suppose one minor footnote from election day was that, election day violence, right, is down compared to 2019, and so that is a good development, I would say. Even if this electoral exercise was well managed, you were going to see legal challenges. Anyway, I suppose why next conduct of this election is that it has created a very definitive casus belli for aggrieved candidates and aggrieved political parties to take up these matters. And in the courts, we have said, we have flagged possibility in research in the past, and we have said that a show element in this election cycle would actually be the performance of the judiciary and its holds, and there are important concerns on the back of recent election petition decisions, especially with some of the off-cycle state races, that judiciary may not be sufficiently independent or sufficiently impartial, or they may not sufficiently apprise themselves of all of the various moving parts from the legal perspective in terms of how our electoral law is supposed to work, in order for them to issue decisions that would actually be seen as, impartial and dispassionate. Yeah, so in the end, this election will largely turn on how INEC did it and how the courts assessed, INEC's behavior. And I would not be surprised if, reruns are called in, certain polling units, in some cases in whole wards. There's a particular situation, for example, on Saturday in Delta State, where an entire voting district in Warri, which is one of the main port cities here in Nigeria, didn't hold throughout election day. Some, voting happened on Sunday, but it's not immediately clear that voting happened in all the units in, I believe it's Warri South Senatorial District. And that's huge talk. And we're talking, almost 100,000, right, voters, right? And so I would not be surprised if reruns called in specific races. We already know, for example, that INEC will conduct a supplementary election in Enugu Senatorial District, where the Labour Party senatorial candidate, right, was reportedly killed. And for the election day, no voting really happened there on Sunday. I think there would be some court-imposed and court-mandated reruns, right, scattered around the country. The question would be, one, how many of those will be called by the courts? Two, how long will it take for the court to make those determinations? So you may have a situation where INEC is conducting and votes way too much. And then three, and more importantly, what is the quantum of votes at play here, and how material is it, not only to the popular votes calculate in terms of who wins, overall, but also in the Route to 24 calculus, and how many of those candidates are able to secure the requisite 25% vote share in order to meet the constitutional bar for winning the election. If it is significant enough on both of those counts, then I think that you would hope for sort of election lawyers, election litigation, and maybe questions about the overall legitimacy of the outcome well into April.
Ike, very, very briefly on this. This is the last bit I'll put to you as we wrap the conversation. Now, in terms of the gubernatorial slots, in terms of the Senate, for example, people have said that the Labour Party has very little, chance of getting a number of those slots. If Peter Obi of the Labour Party did secure the necessary votes, and he also got 2/3 of, 25% of 2/3 of the states, Nigeria's 36 states, that would mean, and that would be 25% of 24 states, by the way. How would it be possible for him to manage the country without the Senate and the other institutions, without that force in those areas? Can you explain to us very briefly on that?
So it could check out in one way. One, we have some anecdotal evidence that Peter Obi's magic dust may be rubbing up on some down ballot Labour Party candidates. So, for example, in Lagos, where I am now, one of the biggest senatorial districts, Etiosa, which roughly encompasses Ikoyi and Victoria Islands. So think all of those parts of Lagos that you see in Nollywood movies was won by a Labour Party candidate almost no one knew. And one of the candidates that he actually beat was a popular Nigerian musician, Banky Wellington of the People's Democratic Party. Sort of anecdotal evidence that the Labour Party may pick up some senatorial and House races here and there right across the country. The second bit has to do with if the Labour Party doesn't get enough of those votes, and go into more establishment and candidates. I think that Peter Obi may still have some point of and some form of leverage, even those candidates. So, if, for example, you are an EC or a PDP lawmaker, right, who is representing a senatorial district that voted heavily for Peter Obi, in theory, your constituents voted for the executive mandate. And if you're seen as being unusually obstructive of the president's governing agenda, then chances are you may be walking on a real knife's edge in terms of how your constituents may view your actual and your real mandate, over there at the National Assembly. And so Peter Obi may exploit sort of these sort of political avenues in order to, push through some of his governing agenda. But, the fundamental premise of this, which is that it would be a lot easier if Peter Obi has a legislative mandate by Nigerians also voting, right, for Labour Party candidates into the Senate, the House of Representatives, right? But there's certainly political, workarounds that he could utilize and shut. At the very least, he's not presiding over, a gridlocked government come May 2023, if he does, of course, win the whole thing.
And of course, from SBM Intelligence, we'll connect with you later as the elections progress to find out what the latest details are. But Ikemesit Effiong is head of research at SBM Intelligence. He joined us for a conversation. Well, moving away from Nigeria now, we're going to keep our radar there as and when some results trickle in. But out of the many plastic waste generated in Ghana, the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology says only 10% is recycled. The remaining waste ends up in the sea as debris threatening not only marine life, but also coastal dwellers in Ghana. Richard Kwejunyako takes a look at the phenomenon and its impact in our latest Hotline documentary titled A Sea of Plastic. Here are excerpts of that documentary.
Lydia Esua is the Director for Policy Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation at the Ministry of Science, Environment and Technology. Lydia is worried about the environmental impact of the garbage that is dumped in the ocean.
There's also another report by the World Wildlife Foundation, which also indicates that averagely, an average person ingests into your system approximately 5 grams of plastics weekly. And to bring it home, the 5 grams of plastics can be likened to a credit card, the size of a credit card. On the average every week, that's the quantity of plastics that we inject into our system. Because obviously the plastics have penetrated through our food chain. So you sit in Accra, you have your delicious fried rice and chicken and whatnot, and you think that, the presentation is good, I cooked it well, there's nothing, but you have no idea the chemicals. Because of the ingestion of the plastics, we are having issues, or the effects of plastics is also being seen in terms of some human health issues that are confronting people. So the issue of obesity, the issue of fertility, people's, not having or having challenges to give birth because of the fact that the plastics are able to mutate the way the hormones are in our system and are able to interfere with the way the hormones operate.
the devastation that plastics are causing the fishing industry is far-reaching. Researchers have recently found alarming levels of plastics in the bellies of fishes, not in the ocean alone, but in Ghanaian lagoons too. Microplastics that end up in water bodies become even more difficult to manage because marine creatures ingest it.
Plastics being on the spawning grounds affects the life forms which the fishes lives on. Therefore, you may not have a lot of fish spawning in there, and therefore it affects the supply of fingerlings or other varieties to the ocean.
Professor Kofi Nyako is the country lead for Ocean Hub, an organization that's working to create an enabling environment for the integrated, challenge-led ocean governance research. Professor Nyako is sounding alarm bells on how the plastics and garbage in the ocean are affecting marine life and the general livelihood of fishes who depend on the ocean. Civil society organizations have been at the forefront of campaigns aimed at ridding the ocean of plastics and other garbage. One such organization is the Green Africa Youth Organization. Desmond Alunwa is co-founder of the Green Africa Youth Organization and the Africa Program Manager for the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives.
And we hopefully we will pilot this the first quarter of this year, water ATMs, where you go in, you slot your coin. Depending on how much you slot in, the water comes for you, and then you bottle up your bottle, and then you go away. And then when it finishes, you get to the next station, and then you do the same thing. I think that this is simple, and nobody is going to be taken out of business. If you want, you can still keep the person who was carrying the water, sit by the dispenser, and that is okay.
It's another beautiful opportunity, and this is Drive Safe. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. I am back at Top Tech Transport and Logistics, and this is where you really need to come if you want to know how to drive properly and do the right thing on the road and save your life as well as that of other motorists. Thank you for joining us. Now today, we're going to be talking about night driving, yes, but with a different dynamic. It is raining. Extreme weather conditions while you're driving at night. Driving at night already is problematic. Throw in other conditions and it becomes chaotic if you are not careful. How do you manage the situation? Before I get to Mr. Gabra though, let's take a quick look at this signal. So you think you know, but do you know? So you've seen that signal and you've seen the different answers. Which answer do you think it is? Curious, huh? So we'll find out at the end of this segment. But let me say hello to Mr. Cecil Gabra. Thank you once more for joining us.
Many thanks. Many thanks.
Great. Now, night driving is the conversation we just had. And we're now throwing in, let's say, a spanner in the wheel. You're driving at night, you're already struggling like those of us with 4 eyes. And there are extreme weather conditions. Let's say it is raining heavily. What changes? What should you do? How should you react as you drive?
Thank you so much. But then, first of all, do you have very good wipers? That is what you have to ask yourself. Wipers in Africa can only be used for a period of 3 months because of the scorching sun. Rubber is not permanent. Rubber doesn't last. And therefore, you cannot use rubber in this hot scorching sun for more than 3 months. So first of all, you need to get a good wiper, and that is why you should always have a set of wiper blades in your vehicle. Now, as soon as you start putting on your...
So basically, just as you have spare tires, you should have spare
wiper blades. Yes. Now, when you put on your wiper blades and you hear that squeaking sound,
it means it's come to the end of its lifespan.
That gives you that warning that very soon it's going to go away from, you know, the system that holds the blade.
Right.
Yes. So that's number one. You need to change your wiper blades. That when you switch on your wiper, you will not hear any sound from your windscreen.
So just to get it clear, once you start hearing that sound, it means you need to replace
time for replacement.
Right.
Right. So that's the warning. Right. So when you set off, you should have what we call the wiper fluid. I think I mentioned it the other time. The wiper fluid must be fully topped up. Okay, and that thing is not soap. Don't use Omo or any hard, you know, soap.
So I go to my filling station, and there's a specific watery liquid soap kind of thing.
Precisely. There's
I actually buy it. It's specific for and that's what I use.
Yes.
Blue colored liquid.
Yes, that is it. That is the wiper. You know, fluid. A lot of people don't know, and that is why they try to, you know, mix up their own chemicals, because some of it also will destroy the rubber. Okay, especially if it's gotten any petroleum products in them. Right. Your wiper blades will go even before the 3 months. So change your wiper blades. Let it be new always. Now, as you set off and then you see that it's raining, you need to ask yourself so many questions. Okay, if you have your phone, you stop, you look at the weather conditions. What your phone says, what Uncle Google will tell you is fairly the truth, right? If you are traveling and then, it's raining heavily, what you need to do is look for somewhere to stop your vehicle, park your vehicle, not under a tree anyway. A plain place is okay. You don't drive in heavy rain. If it's drizzling...
How heavy is heavy?
Well, heavy means that your wiper, number 2, that's how I call it, that's the fast... Okay, and it's cleaning so fast, but still you can't see. Yeah, that's
so it's at the highest point, and you're still struggling.
Precisely. And then also, there is a switch in the car that people don't know. Now that switch produces a lot of heat for the windscreen. Okay. Now you need to put that. It's called a defroster. You put it on. Because obviously you will be using your air conditioner, or you will be using, you'll be driving whilst your glasses are up.
So is it that button that I think it shows, you know, when you want to heat up? Is it that button you're
It's a defroster.
Right.
And then you have it both at the front and then the back glasses.
Vehicle,
okay, so you need to put it on. So that will give you that clearance. So whilst you're driving and then you notice that, hey, I cannot drive again, you look for somewhere and park. Don't force yourself to drive in that rainy condition. Now, before it gets to that point, road crashes occur when it's even drizzling, daytime. Okay, because this is a situation where, especially we are driving on a bitumen road. Okay, when it drizzles on it, the whole road becomes very oily. Your brakes wouldn't be able to work well. You have a situation where you go on your brakes and then you find your vehicle moving towards a direction. Even with all the systems that you have, may not be able to work well.
Your car might even skid.
It will skid off, right? So night driving, when you are driving in that situation, is very, very difficult, and then very tiring, and therefore you must not attempt. Park your vehicle, let the rains calm down, and when you set off, look for floods. In this situation, look out for the vehicle coming in front of you. Okay, if there are no vehicles, put on your most powerful lights, which is the high lights, and drive slowly, because you may be entering a flood which you may not know, especially when you are traveling and you don't know the condition of that road.
Because you can't see too far ahead because of the weather conditions.
Yes, drive gently, don't be in a hurry, and this time, roll your glasses also down so you get the ambience of if there's any water passing. It's really important.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, very interesting. Because water moving at a speed will make that noise even before you get there.
Right.
And it kills a lot of people because those driving the 4x4s are so funny. Not every 4x4 is a 4x4. I always say it. We have vehicles like RAV4, Toyota RAV4, that looks like a 4x4, but it is not a 4x4. However, if you are using the most powerful 4x4, you cannot drive in such situation, okay? And then I think at another time we'll talk about how to drive a 4x4 using all your auxiliary gears.
Okay. Right before we wrap on driving at night under extreme weather conditions, I also want to know, when it's raining, you're driving at night, what should you know when it comes to the application of brakes? Very briefly on that.
Well, thank you so much. You have to look out for the vehicle in front of you. When it moves to the left, move towards the left. If it touches his brake, touch your brake. That is it.
The person in front of you should be your guide.
Yes, the person in front of you must always be your guide, because he will not go on his brake if there's no emergency. If he taps on your brake, on his brake, tap on your brake and wait for the next thing that you do. It's so interesting. Don't think that a person in front of you is not driving well. He is a good driver and he is guiding you. So if you're at the fourth car, you see all the cars in front of you doing the same thing, tapping on brakes, moving to the left, moving to the right, and sometimes abrupt stop. Speed limit must not exceed 60 kilometers per hour at night.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gabra, for walking us through this. Today, we've taken a look at driving at night under extreme or certain weather conditions, specifically rainy conditions. 60 kilometers per hour. Look out for the vehicles ahead of you in terms of how they are braking and all of that. Just follow suit. Don't be in too much of a hurry to get to your destination. Better get to your destination alive than not get there and be dead. That's how we wrap up on a Drive Safe for another segment. Like I always say, drive safe and stay alive. But so you think you know. Here's the answer to today's quiz question. And that's a wrap. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you for watching. A warm welcome back on the AM show. Before we proceed, you do know that water is life and Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And guess what? We have the perfect sizes for all purposes, 330 and 500 ml bottles to fit your pockets and bags, 750 ml for the heavy drinkers and 1.5 liters for those who always want a whole lot more. Our 19-liter jar bottles are ideal for homes and offices. All you must do now is drink Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. Choose a bottle of Awake Purified Drinking Water today and get quality hydration. Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. Remember, for every bottle you buy, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. It's another quality product from Casapreco Company Limited. For bulk purchases, please call 0262 351 251. 0262 351 251. This advert is FDA approved. As we wrap the conversation this morning, guess what? We've been talking about the situation in Nigeria, the elections, and what we can expect from the APC, PDP, and Labour Party front. First time since 1999 that we have a three-horse race, if you like. Developments there we'll be bringing to you on JoyNews. But we've also looked at the Lassa fever outbreak, contained outbreak, if you like. 56 people in quarantine. Another person who had direct contact with the deceased also being treated. That could be 57 if you add the numbers. And we've also told you about some of the symptoms to look forward to or to look out for and how to prevent getting the disease. We've also had that conversation on plastic waste, among others. What are your thoughts for us this morning? Do share by calling 0302 211 691. Akonoba, as always, is our first caller. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you, my brother?
I'm well, oh. How about you?
I'm also fine. Today you are alone. Oh.
I am, but I am with God.
Okay. Let me say fantastic interview. In fact, Professor Asante, I love you.
Dr. Asante.
Yeah,
right.
Wherever he is. May God always continue to bless you. My brother, you see, I want to commend so far the INEC in Nigeria for their contact and their professionalism.
Right.
You see, I've not heard many say that the INEC has disenfranchised them. That is what is important to me. But you know what? For every country to thrive, the people must have the inalienable right to decide their leader.
I see where you're going with this.
Yes, so if an independent commission with all the privileges allows people to vote and does not bring any evidence or does not open way for people to disenfranchise, that is the best thing you can get. So you see, let me just put it what is happening here. How can an electoral commission, knowing our state so far in terms of the national identification, say that they are going to rely solely on the national identification to register Ghanaians, eligible voters? And you see, according to how it is, for the past 2 years, they've not conducted the limited registration. So
right.
It's like anything that the Mensa Commission wants to do. It's like if they want to disenfranchise people. I don't understand. So let me tell them, just as they are independent, that the Constitution says they are, so is Parliament. And Parliament preserves the right to allow the CR to be late and not to be late. So I'm commending Adam Batten and the parliamentarians to make sure she do the right thing, because at the end of the day, if the right thing is not done, it might create certain things that we will not want in this country.
Let's pray against those things that you're intimating. But thank you, Akonoba, for sharing your thoughts. You can also share yours by calling that number 0302 211 691, rolling at the bottom of your screen. What are your thoughts for us? If you're Nigerian or if you're concerned, I have lived in Nigeria for quite a while. My family was there, so I have very strong ties to that country, and I am very interested in what happens there. If you are interested as I am, you could call that number and let us know what your thoughts are. I know people from here who voted owing to the technological apparatus available to the country. They were right here in Ghana and they voted in that election. What are your thoughts? We have another caller from Da Mongo on the line. Papa something. What's your name?
My name is Papa from Damongo.
Right, Papa from Damongo. Papa, please go ahead with your thoughts.
Please, I have some little concern with the Ghana card being the sole document being or to be used by the Electoral Commission to register voters.
What is your concern?
You reported that the NIA suggested that there are about 3.5 million cards that have been locked up due to their indebtedness. So if they are going to use only the Ghana card, how are these 3.5 million people going to register for their voter ID card so they could vote in the next election? So the EC must come again. They shouldn't be intransigent. They should make their system flexible. We don't hear that in other countries. Why are they bent at making Ghana card the sole document to be used for registering voters? I mean, if we have a challenge with even distributing the card, and as we speak, many people have still not been able to register. And even those who registered, 3.5 million of them have not had access to the card. So what are they going to do to make sure these 3.5 get their card before the registration date?
I just have an interesting...
This team must come again. They have to make sure that their systems are flexible.
Right.
Have to make sure that the political parties also are included in this process, because EC alone cannot take this exercise and say they want to carry it to a successful end. So they must involve the political parties or the stakeholders in this electoral process. Otherwise, we are going to create chaos in the unforeseen future.
I agree with you to a large extent on what you're saying, but just to pick your thoughts on this, you do realize that even the minority NDC has said that they are not against the use of the Ghana card, but it's about availability. What do you think? So if it is available to everybody, if everyone who qualifies has a card or has access to getting a card, would that do it for you?
Yes, very well, because that is all that we all want. Because if all of us have access to the card, then it means that we can register eligible voters. This exercise is not or shouldn't be meant to disenfranchise any eligible voter.
Right.
So if a person is unable to register due to challenges that any National Identification Authority itself has elaborated that they have challenges with funding, then why the intention to make it a sole identification document for people to register? So if all of us have access to the card, fair enough. I think that is all. That is what all of us should be praying for.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Papa from Damongo. So we've got a caller from Kumasi, Akonoba called. We also had one from Damongo. What are your thoughts? What do you think about the matters we're discussing, from the Nigerian election to the use of the Ghana card, which has also been topical for our first two callers too? Plastic waste and how it's handled, and of course that issue to do with nugs and Lassa fever as well. What are your thoughts? Call that number 0302-211-691 and let's share our thoughts. We have Echo from Cape Coast, Central Region. Echo, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you, sir?
I am very well. Thank you for calling. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I want to speak on the Ghana card as a sole document for registration for the election. But what I don't actually understand why, for someone to get a Ghana card, the person needs birth certificate to make him eligible to have the Ghana card or passport. But when we are going to register for the election the ID or voter's ID, you are saying that you are not going to accept the birth certificate nor passport. Meanwhile, the sole requirement for someone to obtain Ghana card is by these two documents, which are the mother document. So for me to get a Ghana card, in absence of Ghana card, I believe you should be able to accept a birth certificate and also the passport for somebody to have a voter ID card.
Right.
In fact, the Electoral Commission should come again and make this thing very simple. Even the Ghana card, when you go and you don't have birth certificate, there should be two other people to vouch for you that you are truly a Ghanaian citizen. So I think that they need to come back again. It will create a problem for us in future. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Echo, all the way from Cape Coast in the Central Region. In the next few minutes, we'll be capping off the show. If you have any thoughts you'd want to share with us, now is the time to place that call. Do remember, when you put that call through, to lower the volume on your set so we can hear from you. And don't listen to me on the set, listen to me via the phone. I'm hoping that we can sneak in one or two more calls. 0302-211-691 is the number to call. We have Bismarck from La Paz. Good morning, Bismarck.
Yeah, good morning.
I hope you're well. What are your thoughts for us?
I'm doing well. I want to contribute to the program concerning the card.
The Ghana card?
Yes.
Right.
You see, I think that the media should also help the society a little bit. Because, you see, as we are building a society or building a nation, we have to come to a point where it's like everybody wants to be at his home, wanted everything to come to him as his president. You see, we are talking about a card that we want to rely on it. And there should be a way that the card should be done in such a way that there will be no doubt about its credibility. So these people are saying that if somebody is going to vote for you, there's a process that the person goes through that makes the person very responsible, so that nobody will go and then vote for somebody who he can or he doesn't know him. So why can't we just help these people? Let them build a database for all of us, so that it will be more credible for everything that we want to do with it. You see, now we are having a situation that there are people who are also giving us services by small loans that we are taking on our mobile phones and all this. All this is just because we have credible trust in the people that who apply for all those.
Right.
So if we are doing anything like what, because I listened to Professor Asifa on your program during the News 5, and every explanation he gives went to the point that let us get the point where we will say that this is Ghana card. This is what we want to do with it. Why can't we encourage people to
just a quick one to wrap the conversation. We have to go, but just a quick one. Do you feel, as it is now, with all the challenges that we face and the number of people who have not got their Ghana cards, some through maybe their own fault, others through no fault of theirs, do you feel we're ready to roll this in terms of compiling an electoral register for the rolling registration? Do you feel we're ready for that?
Yes, we are ready. If I listen to Professor Tifa last episode on your News 5, he's saying that we have 2 million point something left. They have all these cards available. All that they need now is a fund, money to do it. And looking at the period that's left for elections to come on, I think that every serious person Ghanaian who also want to contribute to the building of the society, he should find a means of getting his name on the on the what we call the
right.
Yes. And
thank you.
All of us.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
These politicians, they are.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. That's how we're going to cap off the conversation this morning. It's been a pleasure coming your way with all of these interesting stories. Trust us, your home of independent, fearless, and credible journalism, to bring you the latest that you ought to know in Ghana and beyond, especially what is happening now in Nigeria with those elections. But from us to you, from Benjamin Akakpo and the AM show crew, from Patrick Gomez Otulate, Dennis, we call him Quaver, from Nicholas, Echo, my producer, Patrick is my director, by the way, and the entire team, we thank you for watching, for staying with us this morning. Stay, because Joy News Desk is up next. We'll be informing you better. Stay.